Delay the start of ABC's programming to bring you the following special news program. Good afternoon, this is Ray Laws for News 13. It couldn't happen here in Rochester, but it did. Just about midnight today, riots broke out in the Joseph Avenue section on the city's near north side. Race riots apparently touched off by the arrest of a man during a street dance. General rioting, looting, and smashing followed, and it kept right up through the dawn hours and into the morning hours today. Riots are still going on sporadically. Damage is estimated at over $1 million. The riot was quite unorganized, apparently, a mob action, and there are hundreds of incidents connected with it. It was about 3 o'clock this morning that Public Safety Commissioner Donald Corbett called Governor Rockefeller and told him that the situation was getting rather out of hand for local police and asked for state police help. The governor immediately appointed the proper official to do this, and state police are now here in Rochester in large numbers. They are right now congregating all around the sector around Joseph Avenue, Clinton, and all the sector north of the New York Central Railroad Station, about a 2-square-mile area, we might say, according to observations we have made in touring the area. In just a moment, Joe Pell, and we must excuse him for not arriving here just at this second because of the fact that he has been extremely busy and taking all these pictures as well as developing them. He's just now arrived in the studio. Joe, would you come over here, please? And may I give you a microphone that you could put right on? Here you are. It's, how you feel this morning, or this afternoon?
Oh, just great.
That's good. We started, some of the films started rolling, Joe, about what, I think what we'll do is show first the latest films taken during the daylight hours, some of them about dawn today, and then go to the earlier pictures taken during the height of the riots at night. Now, here are some right now. These, this man here apparently was hurt, is that it?
Yes, he was. I think somebody threw a rock at him there.
Mm-hmm. This was after daybreak this morning. This is down in the area of New York Central Station, is it?
Yes, it is.
Right in that area. Where would you say was the worst part of the rioting?
I would say Joseph and Central.
Joseph and Central Avenue, right around the old New York Central Station. Right. I see. Now this is an ambulance taking somebody out of here at this time.
Yeah. There's Chief Lombard's
that's Chief Lombard's car that was tipped over and burned. Is that his personal car or a police car? Do you know?
Gee, Ray, I really don't know. There were so many things to shoot, to photograph.
It was his personal car, yes. All right, fine. That's it. Is that it now? That's upside down at the moment that we see on the screen. I see.
Now let's see. This
is the interior of the automobile right there. Now the chief himself, I understand, was pelted by whose television set is that, by the way?
I don't know where they came from, Ray, but these are where they started looting these.
Looting the various stores along Joseph Avenue.
Right.
Let's ask him to stop the film here at this moment, and we'll recap a bit as far as the chief is concerned. I know you probably are not ready to talk right at this time after being up all night.
I don't even know what I photographed.
Well, everything must have happened very swiftly. And the man at the other end of the in the production studio there ask you if you'll speak up a little bit. I know it'll be quite an effort right at this time, but do so if you can, Joe. I'd like to ask you, did you at the time that the chief's car was overturned, Chief Lombard's car, did you notice anybody pelting him with anything at all?
Well, I wasn't there when the chief was there.
Mm-hmm.
He was there I'd say probably about an hour before I got there.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that they were really
He was
ripping the place right apart.
I understand he was hurt somewhat, but nevertheless kept on duty during the night. There were several policemen hurt. Among 80 people that were estimated as being injured, I think at least a dozen policemen were injured, including is a patrolman, John D'Angelo?
Yes,
I think he was hit by with a bottle in the eye and is reported in the hospital in rather serious condition at this time. Now, in your shooting of the film, did you notice a number of white youths in there also at the time?
Well, the way it looked, if I can recall now, I'm a little foggy right now. I would say that they more or less kept to their own group, and they would antagonize each other, and then someone would start throwing rocks, and this really started it. And then one riot would break one right after another.
Were there fights largely between police and the Negroes, or between?
No, I think the Rochester police were very, very patient.
Mm-hmm.
They were antagonized for at least 3 or 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how they could have held
But
back.
were there fights then between Negro and Negro, or between Negro and
Negro
white?
and white.
Negro and
Negro
white.
and white.
Mostly young people, you would say.
Yes.
Largely the
Right.
youth that came in, and as we saw, as we will see in some of these pictures, there were arrests made of both whites and Negro. Is that it? Also, I noticed, however, that there was considerable compassion shown on the part of some Negroes. I saw in some of your pictures there, and let's roll the film now. We'll get to that later.
Let me just...
There was a photographer, a white photographer, who was treated for...
Yeah, Lou Osier, a very good boy. Let's see if we can run into this.
This is the scene still this is some of the later film. That's
Yeah.
Rabin's clothing store there.
Yes, it is.
And apparently that was looted.
Mm-hmm.
And much of it thrown out.
Rabin Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he's just shocked with the whole thing.
I think a
That's
lot of
for
people
sure.
were shocked. Apparently a lot of
It's
stores...
a horrible, horrible thing. And here are some boys here that, as they put it, they covered the core sign. They just put down freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And there's core.
I see. Do you...
there's a woman that was injured.
were they carrying signs like that, or just...
No.
They were not carrying
I just
signs
saw
like that?
one. I think it was just about one sign.
I see Irondequoit police in there. Apparently there were some suburban police,
They all from all over.
and as
Irondequoit
well as the
police,
state
yeah.
police who
All the
later
way
came
through.
in. Yes. And there is apparently... Why were they waving their hands above their arms at that point, do you know?
This is the only sign right here that I saw. And
They were more or less cheering each other on, is that?
yeah, they were cheering each other on.
I see. All right.
Let's just see what...
Now
this is where there was a misunderstanding. There's Mrs. Johnson, who tried to help.
And it kept on building up as time went on. I see mannequins there from a store destroyed out on the sidewalk. I know one man said he had many furs that were taken from his place. There's another...
There's Officer Dave, like quite a rough day. And right there, they threw a rock at the windshield there, and he's watching himself there. I mean, these boulders and rocks from all over. Here's a man that was overtaken by tear gas, and I have to say that they helped Lou Osier and I quite a bit here.
Listen.
And here's a couple of...
In other words, the photographers didn't run into any rough business at all, is that?
Well, yes, they did.
They did?
I would say about 4 o'clock this morning, there were 2 photographers from the Democrat and Chronicle.
Joe, if you'll hold this mic yourself here.
Yeah, is there?
Okay. Just hold it up so that you can...
my voice is really lost by now.
Well, I shouldn't wonder at all. There
I would say around...
Okay,
around
Dan Morgan
4...
is in here, too. He's been helping you hold the mic during this trying period right at this time.
I would say, I think, around 4 o'clock. There were 2 Democrat and Chronicle photographers, and it was on the corner of Joseph Avenue and Central.
Ray,
Yes.
I have something I might like to
Yes, go
add
right
here.
ahead, Dan.
Last night, of course, I was on the late sign-off here at Channel 13, and it didn't appear to me till I left going home, picking up a morning paper, and going past the Central Station on my way home, cutting west of the city, that everything was breaking out, bedlam, more or less. And I took it upon myself to interview a man that just stopped there because there was a lot of police around, but the thing that I asked was, well, what is this all about? And he said it's the same thing that's happened in Brooklyn, Birmingham, and all over, of course. I did see Congressman Frank Horton this morning, and I think his big message, is a great deal of restraint must be held for the Rochester City people and for everybody around Monroe County for tonight. That was his message that he'd like to give.
I hear that naturally police are quite concerned about any further outbreaks tonight, as they were in New York City all last week, because of the fact that up until last night or so, they had the same trouble, and it seemed that one night would inspire another night's rioting.
Well, what they did, if I may interject, they've been saying right along, you ain't seen nothing yet. And
I think some of the more responsible ones, Joe, however, will be stepping in and helping to tone down such sentiments as that, because there are a lot of people concerned among the Negro population who are heartsick that such a thing as this could happen here.
Very true. Very true.
And I'm sure that these responsible people will step in and help to maintain order, whatever.
Mrs. Johnson, who I think done a wonderful job.
Yes. Well, Mrs. Johnson, now who is she? Who is she exactly?
She must be some kind of leader. She kept telling her people, please try to behave. Let's cut this out. Let's go home. Let's relax. Let's cool off. And some would listen and some wouldn't. And I would say the younger ones were just, you couldn't talk to them.
Well, Joe, I'll give you a moment here to collect your thoughts a little bit more. Right now, as you know, Dick Burt of Channel 13 News is out on the street in that area in our own news wagon there, and we'll show some of the earlier night films right after we talk with Dick Burt. He's touring the scene right now in our Channel 13 mobile wagon. Jerry Pearson, our program manager, I believe, is standing by at the base station here, ready to talk to Dick in the car. So I'll ask Jerry now to call Dick out in the car, ask Burt to come in and report what impressions he may have at this time.
Okay, Dick Burt, this is Newsroom calling you right now. I understand you're out in the news wagon and you're patrolling the area where the rioting has taken place. Dick, can you give us some idea, please, of how the scene looks at this moment? Much looting, reaction, people on the streets. What's going on down there? Over.
Our mobile unit right now is on Joseph Avenue, and peace has been restored. I think that's the first thing to point out, that the situation is quiet now. The streets are patrolled by the state police. About 200 of them moved in this morning between 7:30 and 8 o'clock and dispersed the rioters and restored order. So as far as the immediate picture is concerned, it is quiet. Needless to say, the area is a shambles. Storefronts have been broken. There's hardly a piece of glass intact in this entire section of Joseph Avenue. We've moved up slowly from Clifford on the south, and we're heading toward Main Street now, just passing the Mount Vernon Baptist Church, which incidentally, the church was not hurt in any respect. But every store window that we're passing on both sides of the street has been completely destroyed. And right now, merchants are attempting to salvage what they can of the merchandise that is left in the stores. You can hear the workmen as they attempt to replace the windows and board them up in anticipation perhaps of any future disturbances. The city has their public works department here in full swing right now. They have the big scoop shovels operating as the debris is cleared away. You see mannequins all over the street, broken glass strewn all about, merchandise from the windows. The scene is one of real desolation, you might say, and it's the same thing. We came in on Clinton. It's the same story over there. The area from Clinton, Joseph, north, from Clifford up to Main Street is in pretty sad shape. We're cruising with Jerry. Jerry Carr, what were you going to say?
Just mentioned a few moments ago, we ran into one of the merchants here, Mr. Oscar Rosen, a furrier in this area, who mentioned to us that he had been completely wiped out. An estimated $15,000 in furs had been stolen overnight tonight. He's in the process of going through the wreckage and the remains. Cohn's Restaurant, a popular kosher delicatessen in the Joseph Avenue area, completely demolished. And it's just a sight to behold. It's unbelievable in this day and age. It's really fantastic, I guess is the only word to describe it. In front right now of a superior unpainted furniture store with probably 8 king-size picture windows, every one of which has been broken into. They are in the process of boarding them up at the moment. We're passing number 9 school. This would be interesting, Dick. Can you see if there was any damage done to number 9 school here at the corner of Joseph and Baden?
As we pass by, it appears that all the windows are intact, and that's there goes a police car with the front window smashed and the back window completely knocked out. Now, all traffic has been rerouted around this area, and police have it cordoned off. So we should point out to you that there is no traffic being permitted in the area from the Genesee River over to, let's see, the area from Main Street down to Clifford, and from north, that entire area north over to the river has been cut off from St. Paul Street going east, so that no cars or vehicular traffic is being permitted in the area. The street crews are busily attempting to clean up the debris. We're passing now the new housing development, and everything, as we say now, is a scene of quietness. People, of course, standing around, talking quietly, a little bit shocked and dismayed that such a thing could possibly happen. But happen it did.
I might mention, Dick, right now in front of Newsbomb's department store, at one time one of the fashion plates in the city of Rochester, and every one of the windows, including mannequins strewn about the area, and complete bedlam actually appears to have taken place probably sometime during the night. And to be very honest with you, I do not at this moment see one piece of merchandise on display anywhere, apparently all either stolen or perhaps cleaned out by some of the crews, but I suspect that these items were all stolen.
Jerry, that's a report as of the moment on Clifford. We'll be swinging around other sections in the community, and if time permits, we'd like to talk to some of the people that are here on the scene. But now, back to our studios on Clinton Avenue South.
Okay, thank you very much, Dick. We'll be back to you with constant reports throughout the day from the field. And now back to Ray Laws in the studio.
Thank you very much, Dick Burt, Jerry Pearson, Jerry Carr, for this report on hand at this moment. We are happy to note, as Dick has, that at least everything seems quiet at this time. We do have more pictures to show you now. The earlier pictures taken today, the before dawn pictures, the nighttime pictures, when the rioting was apparently just about at its height. Job, these are the ones taken...
These are cars that were shooting through or down Joseph Avenue toward Central. And I would say on, every few minutes a car would just be batting about 70 miles an hour. And their windows would be broken. There's a police...
Was this before the police had cordoned off any of the area, or what?
Oh, yeah. It had been cut off.
But how were some of these cars getting through? Well, these were mostly police cars
these,
that were getting smashed up.
And then these people that didn't know what was going on would be coming in from the other side of Joseph Avenue, and they'd wait till they get in the middle somewheres.
Mm-hmm.
There's a frantic girl, and here's one boy that got glass in his eyes.
Mm-hmm. That was glass, not tear gas.
No, glass.
Mm-hmm.
And
how many?
There's one that was restrained.
I understand some 55 to 60 persons were arrested.
Ray, I really don't know. I was too busy photographing it.
Yes, I know you were, and I just wondered if you'd heard by word of mouth. This is it, apparently, as near as we can tell from checking police headquarters, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, the suggestion was made that the police release these people and they would call off the rioting. Who made such a suggestion?
Now, this incident right here, I'm sorry,
yes.
Ray.
Go ahead.
This gal was not hit by a car.
Mm-hmm.
She just laid down there, and she had a knife
on her,
I guess,
on her person, and
yeah.
he took the policeman took the knife. Is that
right.
it?
Now, this is where the incident ran through here.
Mm-hmm.
Is where the two photographers. I don't know if it would show it or not.
I think
were
I saw
hit
some
by a car,
photographers.
and I was over on this side,
Mm-hmm.
and we were pretty close. They said, "Let's go after the photographers."
This is somebody else that was hurt.
Yeah, someone else was cut up.
Were there quite
Well, what
a
they
few,
were doing,
cuttings?
what they were doing, Ray, they were throwing tremendous rocks.
Ray, excuse me. We have an interview coming in from Dick
saw that
Burt.
there, yes.
Very good.
We'll wait here till we get this film
All right.
through, and before that time. So, right now, let's go out to Dick Burt, if we may, and for an interview with a policeman there.
Dick Burt, this is Jerry again in the newsroom. I understand that you have a police officer with you at this moment, and he has offered to talk to you about what is going on down there. Would you please, let's hear from you. Over.
Right now we're on the corner of North, and things have settled down quite a bit, so that we have a chance to talk to some of the fellows and get their reactions of what happened last night. I wonder if, could you come over just a second? This is as far as my mic will reach.
Right.
What time did the sheriff's men get in last night?
Most of us got called around 10th Street.
And
quarter of 3.
have you You've been on duty since 3 o'clock?
That's right.
And any idea how much longer you're going to have to stay here?
Not at the present time.
But there have been some men relieved, I understand, that have been sent out of the area. Is that correct?
That's right.
Now, could you tell me a little bit about what you saw when you first got to the scene last night?
Oh, people running all over, throwing bottles, policemen getting hurt, cut, people hollering, screaming.
Well, how big a crowd was it? Any estimate of the size?
Sometimes 200-300 people.
Were they in groups of small groups or one big crowd?
200-300 people at a crack at a corner.
And they'd congregate and start making trouble. About how long did this last? When did it begin to get under control?
Well, just about maybe 3-4 hours ago. Just recently. We had our worst outbreak early this morning.
About what time was that?
Oh, maybe about 7 o'clock this morning was about the worst.
7 o'clock this morning, you figure was about the worst of the entire period. And well, now, any opinions on what's going to happen the rest of the day or this evening?
Well, we better not say, but we hope everything clears up.
We were talking to some state police. Well, we were talking to the sheriff now, but the sheriff's police. But we were talking to the state police earlier, and they anticipate staying throughout the coming evening. Now, most of them feel, of course, the situation is under control, but they are not going to take any chances that there will be another outbreak, another problem develop, and consequently, it looks as if the entire area is going to be heavily manned by law officers for the rest of the day and throughout the coming evening hours. It's impossible to say what the situation may be tonight, but they're taking every precaution. I might point out that in our cruise up Clifford, we must have hit some of the glass because we've gone with a flat tire on our mobile unit. We will be able to continue our cruising, reporting to you periodically on the conditions here. Generally speaking, for the past 3 or 4 hours, the situation has been under control and order has been restored. Dick Burt in the WOKR mobile unit.
Thank you very much, Dick, for that report and for the report from the sheriff's deputy there at the scene. We are happy to hear that they believe that the situation is now under control. We can only hope that all the people in Rochester, in that area particularly, will join with responsible officials in keeping things quiet and in order this evening so that a recurrence of this kind of injury and damage will not happen. For instance, right now, Dan Morgan has just slipped me the latest figures. I don't know if we had that exact before, but at least 80 have now been injured, including about a dozen policemen. And property damage, as we understand it, will run into well over $1 million, although that is really a wild estimate from any of the merchants because it will be impossible at this moment to tell just what the real total of damage will run, including not only merchandise, but the wrecked windows and buildings and equipment in those buildings. Now, I understand, Joe, that you have some film that is being developed that we can show in one of our later programs with Congressman Horton, who was there in shirt sleeves, as I understand, today in the area. And a moment ago, too, Dan Morgan told us about a message that Horton had delivered to him to observe restraint. Dan, maybe you can sort of paraphrase exactly what he did say.
Well, he did say that he wished that all of the Rochester people tonight, especially tonight, so there will not be any more reoccurrence of this tragedy that has happened here in Rochester, will hold a great deal of restraint. That's the big word coming from Mr. Horton, Congressman Horton.
I think at this moment we have probably seen most of the film that we have on hand at this time. There will be more coming up, of course. There is a little bit more film to show, I see. Well, let's take a look at the film. Joe, perhaps you can see what some of these incidents were.
Well, I think this is where they're starting to hose them down.
Mm-hmm. Is it getting
They were
glass
really ganging up, and the rocks were flying.
Mm-hmm.
And there they go, and it's Sergeant there.
Did they stay back with that water pressure?
Oh, yeah. They started scattering all over the place.
Did you feel any of the tear gas? I think I asked you that before, but...
Yeah, I sure did. And these very good people on Buchan Park, the ones that helped Lou Osier, that you just see him pass by right now.
Yes.
And let's see here. Well, what they kept doing, about every few minutes they would go another 10 or 15 more feet.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when the county came in.
This was about what time
They
in the morning, would you say?
Oh, Ray, I would say this one here was running around, let's see. Yeah. They had broken his windows in his car.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just working himself up into a nice big argument. You can see they took him away. Now here they... Well, let's see what
This was maybe 4 or 5 in the morning?
The Livingston coming in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, Ray. We
Yeah.
understand we have some more news copy coming in. I guess a buzz, Ray. We're going to have that in the later edition.
All right. These are still now. Now we've reached the morning hours again. Yes.
They barricaded the area.
Dwayne Dow is here, Ray, with a special report. Dwayne?
I just would like to say, Dan, that we were down there a little earlier today, and things do appear to be rather under control. There is quite a bit of traffic for a Saturday morning, however, in Rochester, and for the curiosity seekers, it might be a good idea if you do stay close to home, as you've mentioned quite a bit of the time during the day.
Very good.
Especially, this might be extremely good advice, of course, if there is some anticipation of any renewed trouble toward this evening. I'm sure that anyone, curiosity seekers or no, would not want to go down there and either have their cars damaged or be physically injured. It would be rather foolhardy to do such a thing merely for the sake of going in and seeing what it's all about. I think at this moment we will recap a little bit as to what happened. You've seen the earlier film we have had here taken, and I must say Joe Pell has done for us a very splendid job, and thank you very much for it, Joe. We will have more later on. We will announce during the day at frequent intervals at what time we will have any more special programs on, and there will be one probably later this afternoon between 5 and 6 o'clock, around that time, or around 6 o'clock. We will break in with any new bulletins or new figures or new items. We interrupt this program for a Channel 13 news executive. Here with the story is WOKR News Director Ray Law. Good evening. We have invited Negro leaders of the Rochester community to speak to our Channel 13 audience this evening on today's racial troubles in Rochester. First, may I introduce the people in our studio tonight. At my left, Miss Hannah Storrs, who is president of the Congress for Racial Equality, or the Congress of Racial Equality. Next to me, Mrs. Constance Mitchell, who is supervisor of the 3rd Ward. And at my right, Mr. Robert Morrison, who is president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Rochester Chapter. We'll begin first with you, Mrs. Mitchell, and I'd like to ask you, first of all, were you in the trouble area last night?
Yes, I was. Mr. Maxwell Walters, the supervisor from the 7th Ward, and myself, we were in the area until 6 this morning.
How were you alerted to it?
I was called at 11:45 last night of the trouble that was taking place in the area.
Who called you on it?
A friend.
I see. And you went over there to see what you could do?
No, I didn't go at that particular time.
Mm-hmm.
My husband went,
Mm-hmm.
and about an hour later, I received 2 anonymous phone calls that informed me that I, along with other niggers, needed to get out of town, and that if I didn't, my house was going to be blown up. And so we had a policeman come by the house, and he stayed at the house until this morning, but I went to my mother-in-law's and took my daughter, and then went to the trouble area.
Now, there have been different versions on how the... Well, earlier it had been reported that a man was arrested at a street dance, and that this touched off the whole thing. Wasn't there anything further than that at the street dance?
Well, it has been said, and this again is rumor, that it was a police dog that bit a woman on the cheek. that actually sparked it off. This, I really shouldn't even be repeating the rumors, but this seems to be the most prevalent rumor that I've heard in the area, that this sparked off the spontaneous rioting.
A number of Negro leaders told me this afternoon that I talked with in your area particularly that they believed there would have been no trouble if merely the man had been arrested. A lot of people seem to think that bringing in the police dogs touched it off more than anything else. Does this seem to be a general sentiment? Would you say this is so?
This might be so, Mr. Laws, but I feel that the frustrations that have built up in the Negro community over a period of years came actually to a boiling point last night, and I think that this is where the trouble has started. I think that not only this might not have sparked it, I think perhaps any incident might have sparked it off.
Well, you speak of the troubles that have beset the Negro people for years in this community. Can you name me some of the troubles that have been caused? Well, there have been repeated charges of police brutality in the Rochester area. Do you believe that any such was involved last night or this morning?
This I did not see, and I'm not going to sit here and go by rumor, because many rumors are flying through the city at this point.
Well, to turn to a more positive aspect of the situation, what do you feel that you can do right at this time?
Well, I feel that there isn't too much I can do at this particular time to stem the tide of passion that is running at this time. And since even I have not been able to communicate with city officials and get across to them the seriousness of this whole explosive situation, all I can do is hope and pray for the best for tonight.
You mean you haven't been able to communicate today or in the past?
I mean today.
All right. Do you feel that community leaders then could have done something in past months or past years to stem any such rioting as we had in Rochester today?
I think that many of the programs that have been worked in the Negro community in the past years, in the past months, certainly could have helped. We've all seen this coming on. We've all prophesied and said that it would come to Rochester, New York. And I think perhaps if we would have all worked a little bit harder, we might have avoided it. But then again, we do not know.
I see. By all, do you mean Negro leaders as well?
Yes, I do.
Well, Mrs. Mitchell, was there any personal experience that you had during the rioting during the night that you might care to tell us?
Well, I would like to say this, that I know what it is to have a hose on you now, and this came about 5:15 this morning, and my only hope and my prayer at this particular point is that I will not see these same hoses again tonight, and that there will be peace and tranquility in Rochester tonight.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mitchell. And now, if we may, we will talk to Mr. Morrison, who is president of the NAACP, the Rochester chapter. And Mr. Morrison, I believe you have a statement for the community?
Yes, I do. We implore you to obey the curfew and remain in your homes, thereby assisting us in working toward improving conditions in our community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrison. And now we will hear from the president of the Rochester Chapter Congress of Racial Equality, Ms. Hannah Storrs. Ms. Storrs, how was CORE involved in the race riots today? How were you personally involved also?
Again, I think that one of the things we must think about in our community is that none of us sitting here tonight really know what happened. We were informed, CORE as an organization, last night about the same time as Mrs. Mitchell. At that time, because of lack of transportation, our vice president went out into the area. And this is how we became involved, and this is how we got all of our reports on what was going on. But I'd like to say a few things about the things in the Rochester community that precipitated this kind of action. CORE does not condone any kind of violence. We again would like to see law and order. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Storrs. From Channel 13 News, a report from Negro leaders of the Rochester community on today's rioting in Rochester.
This has been a Channel 13 exclusive with Ray Laws, WOKR News Director, reporting. Stay tuned to Channel 13 for a special report on the riot crisis at 6:30 p.m. tonight. We now rejoin Wide World of Sports on ABC television.
Dick apparently is talking, has a policeman right now who has been up all night, as most all the police have. And, and of course, you can see the job the police had during the night, especially the Rochester police, who were so beleaguered. And finally, help was brought in. I shouldn't say finally. Actually, it came in very soon because it was at 3 o'clock when Commissioner Corbett called Governor Rockefeller for state police help. And of course, police from suburban towns were in. That's the chief's car at that point. These scenes probably also show some of the looting that took place in...
You'll see TVs, I think, or...
Where would you estimate was the area on Joseph where most of the store looting took place? I understand that.
Yes. Here's a barricade.
Mm-hmm.
And Ray, you have no idea. These people that were running around the streets, it's like a dream.
In other words,
you just can't believe it.
They were completely... most of them didn't know exactly what they were doing, wouldn't you say?
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I think they worked with themselves right up to...
It sort of was a chain reaction.
Which they never released. I think they had something like around 13 dogs.
I wanted to ask you, did you see any of the police, any of the dogs break loose at all? Because we had one report from Negro leaders today that one did break loose and it did bite a Negro girl.
It may have, but I didn't see it. Mm-hmm. I know that they were trying to keep those...
Film taken by Channel 13 staff photographers throughout the night and this morning were taken by Chief Photographer Joe Pell, along with Ed Weintraub, our film editor. Before we recap all the incidents involved and the events that have occurred, I'd like to introduce to you our man, Joe Palladino. He's not here in the studio with us right now, but should be in just a minute, and get from him some of the events that he covered during the night hours, starting early this morning. We'll hold up the showing of our film for a moment until we can do that. However, as soon as Joe gets in here, we'll get going with the film. Right now, however, let's recap a few of the events as we know them now that led to the riots here in Rochester. Something that couldn't happen here. We've been hearing about it all week long down in Harlem, although apparently the damage there and the trouble there was relatively minor compared to what has happened here during the past almost 12 hours now, or just about 12 hours, from 12 midnight to 12 noon today. It all started, as we said before, apparently at a street dance where one colored man was arrested, one Negro arrested at that point, and it started out from there. There appears to be no organization involved in this because it spread throughout the area, a sort of a general unrest directed against police, against others, and there were whites who came in too, and apparently kept the trouble going to some extent, as some of the films that were taken here by Joe Pell will show just a little bit later on.
City Manager Porter W. Homer of Rochester has been in conference throughout the past day and probably since last evening with law enforcement officials. Mr. Homer, what steps are being taken to ensure law and order in Rochester this evening?
Well, we are trying to anticipate anything that might happen. The Rochester Chief of Police, the men from the Sheriff's Office, including the Sheriff, and the representatives of the state police, as well as civil defense officials, all have been working together so that we will have a coordinated team to meet whatever comes up this evening.
Well, Mr. Homer, is there the curfew will be in effect as of 8 o'clock this evening. Can you explain exactly what you have in mind for this curfew?
Well, basically, we feel that it will facilitate a great deal of the job of the law enforcement officers to have as few people as possible on the street, and that it will also increase the safety of the general public if they will stay at home and not come into the area. The more people that we can get off the streets, the less chance there is for something happening.
All unauthorized travel then will be discouraged this evening. Now, in the event of emergency difficulties, it will be permissible for people to leave their homes if they have to go to the hospital or something of that sort.
Oh, yes. We expect some of this, and our men will be instructed accordingly as to how to handle that.
I cannot tell you because I do not know. I can only go by rumor. But I think that one of the causes of the rioting that started last night is the folly of ignoring the needs of the Negro compressed into the ghetto has been demonstrated by the spontaneous riot which appeared last night. And I think that continuing discrimination and degrading of the Negro has finally exploded in spite of the constant warnings that were given that this would happen in our Rochester community. Housing, very bad housing, lack of employment, all of these face the Negro in the community. And even though Rochester is a city with many highly skilled positions, if you are an unskilled individual and the door is not open to you, the frustrations come on, Mr. Laws, and this we find in the Negro community where there are lack of jobs. And when there's lack of jobs, there's lack of money. When there's lack of money, there's lack of food.
But we must look at and examine our community. I feel that I can say a great deal about our community because I've lived here all my life. And I've lived in the so-called Negro ghetto, the 3rd Ward most of my life, and for the past year in the 11th Ward. And I think that we must look at the things that the people who live in these communities face. CORE feels that if Negroes had been allowed to move freely in the community, move where they wanted to, and get the kinds of jobs they were qualified for, we would not have had the riot last night. We feel that the crowding of people in 2 sections of our city is very serious. I know how the young people in these communities feel. I've talked to them, and I think it's time that our city realized that it can no longer create Negro leaders, that it can no longer sit by idly and listen to people who say everything is all right, that it must start going in, making sure that we have equal opportunity in housing, in education, and in employment, and that it must be a community effort, must go down and talk to all of the people and work together. Thank you.
There's Lou Osier, where we were both taken over.
Lou Osier is a freelance photographer,
yes,
we
he
might
is,
explain.
And done a remarkable job.
Did you get any of that tear gas, Joe?
Yes, I did.
I see.
And they helped us out very much.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I don't know if I caught the one guild or not,
mm-hmm.
but they were very, very, very concerned about us.
Basic problems are, but there are no specific demands that such and such has to be done or should be done. Here we see, of course, the state police who were brought in about 7:30 or 8 o'clock this morning. We talked to them. They originally had been asked for at 3 o'clock in the morning when it was very violent. They were finally committed at 5:08 this morning. They formed up and moved into the area about 7:30, 200 strong. And, of course, we're instrumental in restoring order in the 7th Ward area this morning.
You spoke about police brutality probably not being a cause here in Rochester. However, I might add that this is being used as an excuse, whether it's merely rumor or not. Tonight, when we were in the sector of Jefferson Avenue, much of this talk was heard, much taunting about police being brutal was thrown at the police at this point. One of the Negroes there, who happens to be a school teacher, whom I talked with earlier this afternoon, asked several of the youths, well, what evidence do you have of police brutality, say, during the past month or so? And they said, we don't have any. And he said, well, then why are you charging police brutality? And they said, because the police are brutal. This is the kind of answer he was given. But this is the kind of thing that's
Excuse me, Ray. This fellow is apparently involved in looting.
He was
according to our
looting at a
reporter
store.
at the scene, yeah.
Now, the only other discrepancy in the story we have about the man who was arrested at the street dance this morning is that it is alleged, well, it is known that police dogs were brought in. This apparently angered the Negroes, as it has done previously in Rochester. I might point out that a little over a year ago, police dogs were used in quelling a more minor disturbance here, and there was an angry march on on the old police headquarters down Exchange Street, which is now torn down at that time, and a sit-in demonstration because police dogs were used. This is one thing that I suppose quite naturally they're extremely touchy about. However, our photographer, Joe Pal, who was at the scene, did not notice any police dogs on the loose, although it was alleged by some, quite a few that I talked to, that there was a dog on the loose, that the dog did bite a child. However, that is, admittedly, even by Negro leaders, that was a rumor.
I asked Commissioner Corbett the same thing, if he had that report, because apparently this was something that triggered off a great emotional response.
Yes.
And Corbett said that no, they had no report of such a thing happening. He wouldn't deny it, or he couldn't confirm it. And obviously he's been very busy with tactical direction of the situation and couldn't discuss it further, nor had he conducted an investigation of it. All we could say at this point is that the commissioner was unaware of any incident involving the Canine Corps that may have created a more explosive situation.
We might go briefly into the underlying cause of the situation here, Dick, and without making any editorial observations of our own, point out that in talks which were recorded here earlier today on Channel 13 by Negro leaders, the point was made, particularly by Mrs. Mitchell, the supervisor of the 3rd Ward, the basic underlying causes were bad housing and lack of employment. These were the two factors that she did pinpoint as underlying causes of the instance here today. However, as far as the other side of the coin is concerned, this is a little bit difficult to assess. The city administration has been concerned, as you know, with keeping the peace, with trying to restore the peace, really. And when questioned on the matter, city officials have necessarily been non-committal, I believe, because of the fact that their primary job, at this point at least, is law enforcement. Whether there will be any rebuttal from the administration on these particular aspects, I don't know, of course.
I have the same feeling, Ray, that actually it isn't that the local officials are unwilling to discuss with representatives of various racial groups situations and problems. It's just that they've got their hands so terribly filled right now with trying to stop looting, to stop rioting, to stop the threats of violence that have been going on, that they are in no position to discuss things or to try to go into basic issues. They want to see if they can contain the violence and to keep it under control. This afternoon, you could sense as we went around the public safety building that they were just crossing their fingers. They hoped that it was over with, but of course they had to make all preparations that it wasn't. And as it turned out, I would say the first reports of violence that we received came about 7 o'clock this evening, even before the curfew was to go into effect.
Yes.
And these were sporadic outbreaks. There seemed, the impression I got, though, was it was smaller groups, but more violent groups tonight, Ray. Whereas last night the groups got into the thousands. Tonight there were 200-300 groups of 400 and 500 that broke out in various spots. We had reports of difficulties, as we've mentioned earlier. Jefferson, the 3rd Ward area, was the most volatile this evening. We had problems at the Goodman Street Plaza. We had around the the other side of the tracks, north of the tracks, New York Central tracks in the 7th Ward area.
I might point out, however, that the estimate of people involved tonight would be a little bit misleading because of the fact that in the 3rd Ward area where the riots occurred tonight, it was far less commercial, you might say, than it was around the Joseph Avenue section. Also, the area involved, the number of blocks involved, I believe, were more extensive than on Joseph Avenue. There were many more people inside homes throwing out bottles and debris than probably were in the Joseph Avenue section last night. I would judge that there were more people outside last night and far more inside, also causing damage, however, than there was last night, because although there were commercial establishments involved, most of them were combined with residences, and a great part of them were merely multiple family dwellings of the older frame type, as you know. So it's a little bit hard to estimate how many people were involved tonight because of the fact that this was an outside crowd, so to speak, and that they were hanging from the windows all along for an entire 10-block area, as well as being several hundred on every street corner.
Right. I think we ought to rehash now very briefly some of the things that have come into our newsroom this evening from various quarters. First of all, the curfew is in effect and will remain in effect until tomorrow morning. And throughout the entire city of Rochester, people are expected to remain in their homes. There's a curfew that will be in effect till 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. As far as the violence this evening, there has been a great deal of violence through many parts of the city. We have unconfirmed reports of 2 fatalities. One of them may not be in direct connection, however, with the disturbances, the rioting that's been going on.
I would add, Dick, too, that the sale of alcoholic beverage ban that has been put into effect by the State Liquor Authority Commissioner here will be in effect until at least 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. The events, of course, will determine if that remains in effect or is extended in any way. I believe that fairly well sums it up at this time, except to say, Dick, that the conference between Mayor Lamb and the Negro leaders is probably still going on or is just getting over. We hope to bring a report on that within a few minutes or whenever the report is available. We have men, of course, at the scene at this time, but I believe that pretty well sums it up. Anything more to add?
Well, simply that even if, as we have reported, the situation appears to be somewhat quieter at this particular moment, there's no assurance that it's over with for the entire evening. And we will find that all of these prohibitions, that is, against curfew and so forth, will be renewed on a daily basis if necessary. In other words, the setup that we have now is that they will, every 24 hours, renew the curfew, renew the ban on the sale of alcoholic beverages and so forth, if they feel that there's any question that there may be additional problems.
Yes, we would ask now our viewers to stay tuned for any further developments on Channel 13. That's it from here. The Ray Laws speaking for Dick Burt. Good evening for the moment.
Good morning, everyone. This is Dick Burt reporting from the WOKR Newsroom with an up-to-the-minute report on the situation throughout the Rochester area. First, an explanation that WOKR will remain on the air later than its normal schedule in order to keep you fully informed of developments here. We're going to double-check to be sure we do have the right microphone here. We'll throw up 2 of them. Perhaps that'll clarify our audio problem. The latest reports that we can bring to you at this time indicate that there has been no respite in the violence throughout the entire 3rd and 7th Ward areas. We had hoped earlier at 11 o'clock report that there would be some tapering off of the disturbances that have rocked the area. However, there appears to be at this time no respite whatsoever. Continuing reports from our reporters in the field of arrests being made, of violence, looting, rioting in small determined bands, perhaps smaller bands than last night as the difficulties continue. Latest reports indicate 4 policemen have been seriously injured during the course of this evening's rioting. 1 policeman was clubbed over the head with a bottle, another hit in the head by a thrown bottle, a third knocked down by a hammer thrown at him, and the 4th suffered a hand injury. There are untold numbers of injuries at this time among demonstrators as well as police officials. 1 fatal has been confirmed. The man identified as Judson Brayan, B-R-A-Y-A-N, in his late 50s, no definite age, a resident of the Edison Hotel. Our reporter indicated that Mr. Brayan was struck on the head by a man who was reported to have been looting a store. When Brayan was struck, he stumbled into the street area where he was struck by a passing car, a hit-and-run car. His body was carried a number of feet and eventually, of course, disengaged from the car. He was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead on arrival. The only fatalities so far reported: Judson Brayan, B-R-A-Y-A-N, a resident of the Edison Hotel, a white man who died this evening as a result of the disturbances. Now, there have been a number of reports of gunfire throughout the area, of tires being shot on police vehicles, of course, widespread violence and looting. We'll keep you posted with a pictorial report in approximately 30 minutes from now. In the meantime, of course, a series of appeals have come out from leaders of the city and leaders of the community's Negroes asking, of course, that order be restored. And this statement was issued just a few moments ago by Mayor Frank T. Lamb. Mayor Lamb said, and I quote, "As soon as order is restored in our community, I will appoint a committee of representatives of the areas affected, community leaders and government officials to consider any legitimate demands. But let me emphasize this," Mayor Lamb continued, "first and before any consideration can be given to any demands, there must be an end to violence and disorder on our streets. I'm sure that these spokesmen here tonight will, with all other responsible citizens, do everything in their power to restore peace and calm to Rochester so that reason and not violence can have its way." The mayor, from a political standpoint, making every effort. Now, we're dividing between the military effort and the law enforcement effort. The mayor attempting to placate roused feelings. He and his advisors are making every effort to establish contact with the Negro leadership of the community and with any spokesman who feels that they represent a group that may have something to contribute to bringing about easing of the atmosphere. On the other side, of course, are the law enforcement officers who are trying to maintain law and order. Their job is to stop the looting, to stop the violence, not to attempt to arrive at any settlement. So efforts are being made in 2 directions at this very moment, one by the police officials, the other by the governmental officials. Now, as far as efforts by the police officials are concerned, we have the regular Rochester City Police, at least 200 strong, on duty this evening. Naturally, a number of them of men have been on duty for extended periods of time, and they have been relieved. New men have been brought on. But augmenting the 200 Rochester City Police that are on duty are representatives from the sheriff's departments and the towns in the area who are working extra hours. There are, at this time, 200 state police in the area. An additional 100, bringing, we estimate, about 400 state police are expected to be in the city before the day is over. So, as we say, these are the steps being taken by law enforcement officials. They are attempting to strengthen their position and stop the looting which has taken place, the violence, throwing of bricks, of stones, of bottles. We have some film taken earlier which may help to dramatically explain the things that have gone on today. You'll see, of course, at times the police leading away not only Negro demonstrators, but white demonstrators, as this was film taken yesterday, a little different situation than what we ran into this evening. The violence this evening seemed to be predominantly in the 3rd Ward, the section around Jefferson, as opposed to the 7th Ward, the Joseph Hudson North Street area, although there have been sporadic outbreaks throughout the entire city. We've had reports of gunfire, of hit-and-run type looting throughout the entire community. Now, since 5 o'clock this afternoon, there has been a ban on the sale of all alcoholic beverages. The state liquor authority has ordered the sale of alcoholic beverages discontinued, not only in the city of Rochester, but in all of the adjoining towns, Greece, Arundequoit, Webster, Penfield, Perrington, Brighton, Henrietta, Chaline, Gates, up till 5 o'clock tomorrow. At that time, they'll decide whether this, incidentally, is Chief Lombard's car. The chief attempted to, yesterday, attempted to disperse a crowd, and according to the chief, we felt that he was fortunate in escaping with his life when they would have no part of it. Those are some of the films that were taken yesterday, early this morning, and throughout the day. As there was a respite around 12 o'clock to late in the afternoon, and crews moved in and cleaned up the streets fairly well. They were boarded up. Shortly before 8 o'clock this evening, when the curfew was to go into effect, violence broke out again. It seemed to almost explode. It calmed down. It took off again. It calmed down. Currently, they have their hands full. Later this evening, we will show you films of the action that has taken place tonight. Repeating now, the situation as it exists is still extremely tense. All citizens of Rochester are reminded that a curfew is in effect. The citizens are asked to remain at home until tomorrow morning. No unnecessary travel throughout the entire city. And that, of course, includes not just the downtown area, but all of the fringe area as well. No travel is in those areas will be permitted. This is Dick Burt with a brief report on what has been transpiring through the evening hours. We invite you to stay tuned to Channel 13 as we continue to bring you up to date on developments with a pictorial report in approximately 30 minutes of action that has taken place this evening. We invite you to stay tuned now for a motion picture as WOKR remains on the air to keep you informed of developments in the tense situation in our city. Good evening, everyone. This is Dick Burt reporting from the WOKR Newsroom on current conditions in the city of Rochester. As of this moment, the situation is still critical in some areas of the city. However, the general impression is that they are much more under control now than they have been at other times during the course of the past 24 hours. At least one man is dead and 4 policemen seriously injured in the second straight night of racial rioting in predominantly Negro sections of Rochester. The Rochester victim was an elderly white man who was reportedly slugged by a band of looting Negroes and then struck and run over by a passing car. He's been identified as Judson Brayan, B-R-A-Y-A-N, in his 60s, an estimated age, a resident of Edison Hotel. He was dead on arrival at Genesee Hospital. That is the only casualty, fatal casualty, reported so far. The current trouble spots at this very moment are Central Park, the Jefferson and Bronson area, the Plymouth Avenue Circle, and around Hudson Avenue. And now to recap a little bit of the activities before we bring you up to date with recent films shot this evening. The trouble started just over 24 hours ago. As best as can be determined, it developed at a dance on North Street where police were summoned to arrest a man charged with drunkenness and disorderly conduct. And during this attempt at apprehension of this man, the violence broke out. It quickly spread throughout the 7th Ward area of the city of Rochester, the area indicated on our map from Clifford Avenue south to Main Street, although for the most part damage was concentrated between St. Paul, or actually Clinton Avenue, and Goodman. The 7th Ward was the area, as you see marked off on the central part of the city, that was heavily damaged last evening and again early this morning. There was relative calm throughout the city for the period from 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon into the early evening hours. And then suddenly around 7 o'clock, a Mayday call at Bronson and Jefferson. The police signal indicating a serious outbreak, a disturbance over which they needed reinforcements. And reinforcements have been provided to the city police, who have been standing by about 200 strong this evening. They've been augmented by a force of an estimated 400 state policemen who have been called in to render assistance. At various times through the evening, apparent consideration was given to requesting the National Guard. We had a number of people calling the station asking why this wasn't being done. The circumstances under which the National Guard can be brought in are only at that time and when the local law officials say they no longer can control the situation. And although they were vastly outnumbered and there were many, many serious moments, the authorities in charge believed that they were able to control the crowd, and consequently, although the Guard had been on a standby basis, they were not summoned. Now, we have some film to give you an idea of the action this evening at the Public Safety Building, the new Public Safety Building, as rioters were brought in by the policemen. So far, an estimated 400 people have been arrested. Now, that includes last night's people and tonight's. Over 200 were brought into headquarters this evening, as you see them unloading from the paddy wagons, usually in groups of 5 or 6, individual patrol cars coming in with 1 or 2 men. They're brought into the basement entrance of the Public Safety Building, and of course, many of them in a very forceful fashion. There you see Officer Jensen escorting the men, many cases, of course, compelled to use force to bring them in. An estimated 200 or more arrests, and they are continuing at this very time. As the police vehicles come in, they show the scars of the battle that's been taking place. Hardly a vehicle comes on the scene, but it has received a barrage of stones. We saw vehicles over there that must have been hit by mustard bottles, obviously a grocery store that had been looted, and then the mustard jars thrown at the police cars. Broken windows in the sides, front, back of police cars as they bring in their prisoners arrested at the scene of these various outbreaks. The determined look on the officers as, of course, they reach the point of exhaustion in some cases, these men, some of them having been on duty for extended periods of time. Here you see the number of cars, a continual line of men of arrests that have been made being brought to the Public Safety Building where they are booked. It's an estimated 400 arrests that have been made at this time. There are probably and undoubtedly will be more as the night continues. Certainly the situation is far from quiet in the city of Rochester, as more and more they are able to contain the violence, yet it does continue. Reports of stores being looted, of numbers of demonstrators and rioters being contained in inside stores or in given areas by the police, the state police. Here you see, I believe, the Salvation Army, Red Cross on hand to provide sustenance to the officers, many of whom have been on duty for hours, hour upon hour, without any relief. And these men are being given refreshments by the Salvation Army and the Red Cross, who are in evidence over at the Public Safety Building this evening. There were reports that of some fires this evening. On our police radio, we heard reports of fires at Michael Stern, at a liquor store on Tremont Street. From what we've been able to determine, none of them, however, were of any serious consequence. Here you see more squad cars coming in as car after car unloads its manacled, in many cases, prisoners who will be charged with various charges. An estimated 400 now that have been taken into custody. As you can see, they're representing various age groups and, of course, both races as they are picked up by the Rochester Police Department. Now, this evening, Mayor Lamb conferred with a group of Negro clergymen and civic leaders in an attempt to see if they could establish some form of communication to determine what might be done in a long-range fashion. And at that time, the mayor, meeting with the leaders, had a conference, and we have sound on film of the statements made following that conference.
To the people of the Baton Street, R Mount area, this is Nathaniel Wise. I was arrested this morning, and I'm now out on bail, not only because of the NAACP of the Muslims, but because of somebody that is interested in our problem. We met with the mayor of Rochester and the city manager this afternoon, and they have agreed to listen to our demands. These are our demands. Number one, that a mayor's committee be formed made up of people selected by the residents of the affected areas, plus city administrators and civic leaders. Two, that the police advisory board include people from the affected areas. Three, that the mayor's committee take concrete action to encourage the establishment of more Negro businesses in the area. Four, that the mayor's committee encourage that the use of more Negro workers in settlements and public areas. Five, that the responsible area residents be deputized to help keep the peace. First, that the people may know that they are being represented. Second, so that they might discourage the possibility of brutality. Those hearing my voice, our demands are being heard. Please get off the streets. Go home so that we can see that things are worked out.
As soon as order is restored in our community, I will appoint a committee of representatives of the areas affected, community leaders, and government officials to consider any legitimate demands. But let me emphasize this. First, and before any consideration can be given to any demands, there must be an end to violence and disorder on our streets. I am assured that these spokesmen here tonight will, with all other responsible citizens, do everything in their power to restore peace and calm to Rochester so that reason and not violence will have its way.
I am speaking for the 3rd Ward in particular. I'm Reverend Schenkel, pastor of the Church of God, Clarissa Street. We are asking, inasmuch as these demands are being heard, for all to please go home, stay off the streets, and above all, we cannot expect to win fighting against the law. So please, we are urging each one of you to go home, obey the law, stay off the streets. Then demand will be heard. Thank you.
Now, joining with Reverend Schenkel and Nathaniel Wise in this appeal were Otis Felder, Thomas Coleman, Reverend Julian Simpkins, and Reverend Marvin Chandler, who all joined their voices in this declaration that attempts are going to be made to get to the basic cause of this disturbance and urging people to obey the law and to remain off the streets. Now, what is the situation as far as the public is concerned? Number one, curfew is in effect and will be in effect until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. This is for the entire city of Rochester, not just the disturbed areas in the 3rd and 7th wards predominantly, but in the entire city of Rochester. The police have been given instructions that people found on the streets congregating are subject to arrest in violation of this curfew regulation that has been put into effect. We understand, however, that people on emergency business are permitted to travel outside of these areas in some cases. They will be permitted to go to the hospital or to conduct their business if it is absolutely necessary. The big rule of thumb that the officers seem to say is use common sense. There is real serious trouble in the city, and the best thing to do, of course, for those not directly involved is to stay out of the city and stay out of the area. The curfew will remain in effect until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, which means that following that time you will be free to attend religious services on Sunday, or the beaches and public parks will be open. That is the current understanding. Unless there should be any change there, the parks and the beaches and the general areas of public accommodation will be available tomorrow, although the parks and the golf courses will not open until 8 o'clock, not their usual sunrise hour. There will be no sale of alcoholic beverages, either in stores, restaurants, bars, at grocery stores, or any location. No sale whatsoever of alcoholic beverages in the city of Rochester and in the adjacent towns until 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. At that time, they will decide whether they will continue the ban on the sale of alcoholic beverages for an additional period of time. All stores selling firearms are no longer permitted the sale of firearms or ammunition at this time. They're in an attempt, again, to lessen the provocation that might arise. There have been sporadic outbursts of gunfire this evening. We've heard them, we've heard reports, we've seen the evidence of them. To our knowledge, there have been no serious injuries as a result of the gunfire, and most of that, of course, has been very isolated instances. The chief problem has been, of course, the throwing of rocks and bottles and any other debris that happens to come along. A number of stores have been looted this evening. There's been no estimate dollar-wise of the amount of damage that's been done. One figure over the first 12 hours of rioting indicated in excess of $250,000. Undoubtedly, the figure will go higher as the results of tonight's disturbance. To generally summarize, then, the disturbance that broke out late last evening and a hot and humid Friday in Rochester was concentrated primarily north of the New York Central tracks in an area north of the Rochester Post Office, bordering the area from Clinton to Goodman, from Clifford south to Main Street.
We interrupt this program to bring you the following special news bulletin with pictures taken at the scene of the helicopter accident this afternoon at about 3 o'clock. Dick Burt reporting.
34, go ahead, Dick. You have a report. The films of the crash are on right now.
At approximately 4 o'clock this afternoon, Colonel of the Civil Defense, Colonel Abbott, was traveling over the congested 3rd Ward of Rochester as he was reviewing the situation. His helicopter at the time was functioning properly according to eyewitness reports. However, there might have been a mishap of some sort. At any rate, the helicopter collided with a building here at the intersection of Tremont and Clarissa in the heart of the predominantly Negro section. The plane came down and exploded, and the helicopter pilot is believed dead. Colonel Abbott is reported to be dead. However, we have no confirmation of that. A 3rd passenger in the helicopter was believed unhurt. 2 occupants of the house, who have not yet been identified, were dead. A total of 3 confirmed fatalities, possibly 4, in this tragic mishap. However, in talking to some of the people in the area, there may be some good in that it is seemed to have a calming effect on the citizens who have found that this sort of thing may tend to cut down on the violence and the demonstrations, the rioting and the looting that plagued this area last night.
Thank you very, very much, Dick. We'll be back to you as soon as possible if you have any further word. Now back to the studio.
This has been a WOKR newsman Dick Burt reporting.
Good evening, everyone. Tragedy struck again in our racially troubled city this afternoon. About 4 o'clock this afternoon, a helicopter piloting a civil defense leader, Colonel Abbott, was traveling over the troubled 3rd Ward area in the vicinity of Clarissa Street. The aircraft was observing any street disturbances in the area. It was piloted by a capable pilot, and as we say, the civil defense leader was looking the scene over from the air. About 4 o'clock, the plane crashed into a residence. We have film of the scene, which we'd like to show you at this time, taken very shortly after the plane actually hit. And here you see the fire being played on the residence at 446 Clarissa Street. This is near the intersection of Tremont and Clarissa Street, where the helicopter hit a residence, killing 2 occupants of the house. Here you see an automobile in front of the house, which was hit by the parts of it hit by the helicopter, and it was burned out as well. 2 occupants of the house have been confirmed as dead. They have not been identified at this time. The pilot of the helicopter was killed, and Colonel Robert Abbott is in critical condition at the hospital at this time. 3 known dead, 1 seriously injured. There may be other people injured as a result. As you can see, the firemen immediately came to the scene and attempted to put out the blaze. A witness, Curtis Green of 445 Clarissa Street, told us he was across the street at the time when the helicopter coming down Clarissa Street, a couple of hundred feet above the ground, suddenly seemed to stop, and he thought at first the helicopter was coming down to land in the street. The helicopter blade caught the edge of an adjacent building, toppled into 446 Clarissa Street, where it immediately exploded. 2 members of the New York State Police, were in the area doing patrol duty. They immediately rushed to the scene. They were George Terrace and John Schmidt. Both men attempted to extricate the passenger and the pilot of the helicopter and were severely burned in doing so. However, they are credited with saving, at least for the time being, the life of Colonel Abbott, who is in serious condition at this time. State Police officers George Terrace and John Schmidt are at Strong Memorial Hospital, along with firemen Herbert Cox and Charles Zimbra, who were also injured in combating the blaze. Popular and well-known Assistant Chief of Police Henry Jensen was overcome at the scene. We have additional footage taken at the scene shortly after the fire was brought under control. Here you see that the building at 446 Clarissa Street is under control. Civil defense officials, police officers, state police have arrived at the scene. A large crowd of 300 or 400 spectators immediately gathered. They were cordoned off. There were no demonstrations, and this was a very silent, in comparison with last night, a very silent gathering of people, curiosity seekers and witnesses who wanted to see what had happened. As you can see, they're silent for the most part. This is in sharp contrast to the action that took place in this very same neighborhood last night. The city police, the officers and men of the state police, the civil defense officials, firemen who cordoned off the area. The FAA notified the city that there was to be no interference with the helicopter until a complete examination could be made. Every one of the city's ambulance services were available. Here goes one of the firemen that was overcome temporarily. As a larger crowd gathered, additional state police were brought into the scene. Here you're seeing them marched in. Now, there were no disturbances among the spectators. However, because of the size of the crowd that gathered, and at one time reached several hundred, additional men were brought in to maintain order. You can see the ropes have been put in place now, cordoning off the area. And here you see some refreshments from one of the neighbors giving a drink of water to one of the tired and weary officers. The heat, and it was 80 degrees this afternoon in Rochester, made the job of the policeman a little more difficult and perhaps contributed to the fact that Henry Jensen was taken to the hospital after he had collapsed. Here's the automobile that was parked in front of the house on Clarissa Street, and you can see that it too was completely destroyed. 2 occupants of the house have not been identified. As far as we know, they were the only victims in the house, although another gentleman that we talked to on the street said that there were a number of people living at the house, adults and children, that they believe there were only 2 victims. Here you can see the firemen attempting to take away some of the debris. The accident occurred about 4 o'clock this afternoon in clear skies and ideal flying conditions. Whether it was a mechanical failure or perhaps a pilot failure will have to be determined by the FAA. At any rate, the helicopter came down at the intersection of Tremont and Clarissa Street, killing 3, the pilot, 2 residents of the house, and at this time, Robert Abbott, the head of the civil defense, is in critical condition at the hospital. There did seem to be this effect as we talked to a number of spectators at the scene. At least they expressed the hope that this tragic incident, adding to the life that was lost last night, might have a calming influence on the people. And speaking of calming influences, many of the Negro leaders went on television throughout the course of the day in sincere appeals to the citizens of Rochester to restore law and order. Mrs. Constance Mitchell, the supervisor from the 3rd Ward, was the first to ask for an opportunity to speak to the citizens of the community, asking that they observe the law. The supervisor, Maxwell Walters, from the 7th Ward. And this afternoon, the members of the NAACP held a news conference, and again, basically asking people to remain off the streets. Now, the current announcements of the conditions that will exist this evening in Rochester, curfew will remain in effect. The order has been written up in such a fashion that curfew will automatically be in effect until the emergency is over. City Manager Porter W. Homer has authority to declare the emergency, and he can declare the emergency over. Until such time, curfew will remain in effect. That starts at 8 o'clock this evening, and it's in effect for the entire city of Rochester, not just the disturbed areas. There will be no transportation available from the Rochester Bus Company as their buses complete their routes after 8 o'clock. People who are on the buses at 8 o'clock, of course, will be taken to their destination. The buses will complete their loop and return and go in. The president of the bus company, Mr. Lang, informed us shortly before airtime that bus service will resume shortly before 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, enabling people to get to work on time so that they will be taken care of in proper transportation. A number of incidents have taken place throughout the city, throughout the day. Periodically, we have reports of them. I understand that one of our mobile units is on the scene now, and I believe Joe Pal has a report for us.
This is News Base at Joe Palladino in car 34. Joe, come in, please. Go ahead, Joe. Describe what else you see.
I'd love to get out of this car right now. I've got to start shooting. I'll check with you later. 10-4?
10-4, Joe. Thank you very much. And now back to our studio and Dick Burt.
We've had reports throughout the afternoon hours of periodic outbreaks of violence in various sections of the city, around Ward Street, on portions of Clarissa Street. Small groups, not large groups, involved in rioting, looting, and creating disturbances. Our remote units are on the scene as these reports come into the police headquarters as we attempt to give you actual reports of what is transpiring. One of the main things at this time, of course, is to review the conditions that exist. As we started to say, curfew is in effect and will remain in effect until the emergency is lifted by the city manager. The ban on the sale of alcoholic beverages will continue. Now, throughout the past 24 hours, no alcoholic beverages could be sold either in stores, bars, taverns, hotels, grocery stores. No alcoholic beverage could be sold in Rochester or the immediately adjacent towns. This afternoon, the Commissioner, Corbett, requested that that ban be extended to cover the entire county so that now the liquor ban is in effect throughout entire Monroe County, not just the city and the immediate towns. This ban will remain in effect till 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. At that time, it might be renewed for another 24-hour period if circumstances necessitate. Appeals have been made to people of both races to restore order, and perhaps at this time we should listen to the first of these appeals from Mrs. Constance Mitchell, the supervisor of the 3rd Ward. No, I'm sorry, what film do we have up at this time? Street Scenes. All right, let's roll this next film first, then. Oh, these were scenes taken this afternoon at the helicopter crash on Clarissa Street, shortly after 4 o'clock this afternoon, and here we are talking with one of the civil defense men and the officers of the police department who gave us reports on what they had seen. Now, this area has been very heavily patrolled throughout the past 24 hours. Here you see state police. Here you see a fireman who has been overcome in fighting the blaze. This 80-degree heat coupled with the extensive smoke, smoke that could be seen for at least a quarter of a mile from this fire. The helicopter actually, the gas exploded and spewed all over the building, and the entire home at 446 Clarissa went up. The owner of that building was Ray Hunter. We do not have the names of the residents at that time. Curtis Green, who lived across the street, told us that there were a number of people living there, that they move in and out from time to time, and he did not know the names of the people. Consequently, we could not, of course, identify those that were killed. Scenes taken this afternoon at the intersection of Tremont and Clarissa, where the helicopter crashed. Now, we're saying that there have been a number of statements made by representatives of both races. Last night, of course, the mayor making his appeal to all of the citizens of both races, of all walks of life, to obey the curfew, to remain off the street. Their first consideration being, of course, the preservation of law and order. The second comment that the mayor made, and his statement is as follows: as soon as order is restored in our community, I will appoint a committee of representatives of the areas affected. That would be, of course, the 3rd and 7th wards, community leaders and government officials to consider any legitimate demands. But let me emphasize this. First, and before any consideration can be given to any demands, there must be an end to violence and disorder on our streets. I'm assured that these spokesmen tonight, and he was referring to a number of clergymen who are on hand, will do everything in their power to restore peace and calm to Rochester so that reason and not violence have its way. Yesterday, the mayor was in conference with a number of leaders, and they released a statement asking, the statement came from Otis Felder, Thomas Coleman, Reverend Schenkel, Reverend Simpkins, Reverend Chandler, and Nathaniel Wise, that the first demand would be that the mayor's committee be formed, that the police advisory board include people from the affected areas, that the mayor's committee can create action to encourage the establishment of more Negro businesses in the area. This was a rather unique demand. No details spelled out of how this could be done, but in talking with a number of Negroes in the area, there is resentment of the fact that there are not more businesses owned by Negroes and controlled by Negroes, that the mayor's committee encouraged the use of more Negro workers in the settlements and public agencies of the area, and that responsible area residents be deputized to help keep the peace. On this last point, the mayor took strong issue, refusing to deputize any civilians at this time to maintain law and order. The mayor is very firm that this is a job for the professionals, a job for experienced police officers, and he would not accede to that demand. But as we say, the mayor did say he would meet with people as soon as the order was restored. We now have statements on sound on film of, first of all, Mrs. Constance Mitchell, the supervisor of the 3rd Ward, who addressed her remarks. So we'll hear that film next. Mrs. Mitchell was at the commissioner's office this afternoon, and she, along with so many of the police department, had spent a sleepless night. That was Mrs. Mitchell, the supervisor from the 3rd Ward, the area that was most heavily affected last night. Now the supervisor from the 7th Ward, who is Maxwell Walters, an area that was hit 2 nights ago. Film.
And as I speak, I am not speaking as a supervisor of the 7th Ward or as a leader of any group or even as a leader. I feel that I have a responsibility to the citizens of Rochester and to the citizens of my own community, and that is the reason that I am here. We must prove to society, of which we are members, that we are responsible members of this society. Society owes us, and by the same token, we owe society. The cleavage is deep, but I would ask you to remember that hate only begets hate. As members of this community, we have a responsibility to help and maintain law and order. To the angry young men in the streets, I say, your difficulties will not be solved in the streets, but your message has been heard. Please stay off the streets this evening. And to the white community of Rochester, in this hour of trial, we ask for tolerance and understanding. This is not an attack upon the community, the white community of Rochester. This is an attack by these angry young men upon society which allows these conditions to prevail and not an attack upon any individual member of society. So again, to my own people, I ask that you stay off the streets. Your problems cannot be solved in the streets, and you have a responsibility not only to yourself, but to the community to show that you are respectable members of this society. I thank you.
And that was Maxwell Walters, who is the supervisor from the 7th Ward. The 7th Ward, of course, is that section of the city that was most heavily affected the first night of the rioting. Mr. Walters actually went to the scene and attempted personally to restore order, and he, along with many other people, were unsuccessful. Later on in the afternoon, the officials of the NAACP held a press conference. A group of half dozen local and national leaders are in town, and they, along with their local president, had a statement to make. Their local president is Mr. Robert Morrison, who is branch president, and here is his statement to reporters this afternoon at a press conference held at the Sheraton Hotel in Rochester. He was accompanied, as I say, by a number of people from not only here in Rochester, but representatives of the entire New York and New England area, including Thomas Allen, their field secretary, the LaPloys Ashford, the local youth leader, Bill Cook, the president of the Rochester Youth Council, Robert Morrison, the branch president, and Maurice White, the public relations director. Our films are unedited, but I believe that this time Mr. Morrison is about ready to begin his statement. We'll go to film and see if we can pick up the interchange that has taken place at the news conference held this afternoon at the Sheraton Hotel with members of the NAACP.
The Rochester branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People views with alarm the events of the last 2 days in the city of Rochester. This situation is one which the NAACP and other civil rights organizations have been trying to prevent by working toward the elimination of the basic underlying causes of such eruptions. In keeping with our tradition of respect for law and order, we urge an immediate end to all rioting and looting. The eruption of violence has focused attention on the discontent, despair, and deprivation which pervades the Negro community. The continuation of this lawlessness will only serve to make more difficult any reasonable resolution of the legitimate complaints of the Negro community. The violent deaths of President Kennedy, Medgar Evers, and the children in Birmingham clearly points to the futility of violence. The NAACP recognizes these legitimate complaints of the Negro community, such as the poor relationship which has long existed between the police department and the members of the Negro community. This has been manifested by misuse of police authority in many cases, and the presence of police dogs which infuriate members of the Negro community when they show up. There's also unnecessary intimidation of many Negro citizens. Some of the basic underlying causes are inadequate job opportunities, which lead to a sense of frustration, particularly among Negro youth who see no opportunity in the future for them. There's also substandard housing and the fact that, to a large extent, rental housing has been closed to Negroes outside the Negro ghettos. Another factor is the de facto segregation of schools in the city of Rochester. Also, poor counseling of Negro students within the Rochester schools. There's also the fact that recreational facilities are inadequate, so that Negro youth frequently ends up on the streets instead of in supervised recreation.
Now, these were some of the complaints and some of the deep-seated causes as viewed by the NAACP. The speaker at that time was Mr. Robert Morrison, who is the branch president of the NAACP here in Rochester. Now, as I say, their press conference this afternoon was largely devoted to explaining what they viewed were the underlying causes for the disturbance here, and they were quite strong in their objection to the use of police dogs and what they felt were very poor relations between the Negro community and the Rochester police force. Ray Laws has come back after checking our news sources. And Ray, do you have any late report on the condition of Deputy Chief Henry Jensen, who was at the scene of the helicopter crash this afternoon?
Yes, I do, Dick. As a matter of fact, we've just gotten word from Becky Keene, who is information officer at the Strong Memorial Hospital, regarding the condition of Henry Jensen and some others. Inspector Jensen apparently is in the hospital because of complete exhaustion. His condition is listed more or less as satisfactory. Colonel Robert Abbott, head of the Civil Defense Agency here, is, however, in extremely serious condition. He has third-degree burns over 60% of his body, according to the report. Troopers Karras and Schmidt were released this afternoon. Apparently their injuries have been taken care of. I have reports also from two other areas. One is from the Public Safety Headquarters building, where they are asking broadcasting units to stand by for a momentary announcement, believed to be in regard to possible calling of more reinforcements to the Rochester area. Of what nature, we do not know at this time. We should hear something momentarily from them. And one other source, Joe Palatino, is now down at Gordon Park and Ward Street, where tear gas is now being used, where violence has sprung out anew, where Joe reports at this just a few minutes ago that conditions are pretty bad, heads rolling, as he put it, and some gunshots. So what the situation is right now at Gordon Park and Ward, we don't know exactly, but there is trouble brewing there. In fact, there is trouble there at the moment.
We've heard police calls to the Ward Street area throughout the afternoon. There have been periodic outbreaks there. This
is a little bit more than that. This is quite serious at this point.
It has gone pretty deep.
Yes.
We explained earlier that State Policemen Karras and Schmidt were the two men who attempted to extricate the men in the helicopter. Yes. And one of the eyewitnesses at the scene said those fellows really deserved a medal because they went in when the thing was consumed by flame in an effort to release the people inside the helicopter. Mr. Jensen's condition perhaps is certainly understandable, as so many of the police department have been operating night and day without any respite, and fatigue is beginning to catch up with a number of them. Now, they've attempted, of course, to maintain staggered schedules somewhat in anticipation of further difficulties. Ray, I believe we have another remote report from Joe Palladino on the scene. Let's check and see if we have word from him.
This is News Base to car 34. Joe Palladino, please come in. Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Dick. It's really hot and heavy here. State troopers are here. They've got, I'd say, at least a half a dozen wagons here. They're picking them up by the dozens. If you just hang on for a minute, let me get one of the officers to give a statement. Hang on.
Okay, Joe, we'll hang on. I understand there is a lot of rioting again down in your area. Hold on just 1 second, studio.
Hey, sir, would you like to give a statement? Would you come over here on this side, please? Officer?
Come in, Joe.
What is your name, sir?
Detective Anthony Leonardo.
Mr. Leonardo, have you seen anything, officer?
Yes, I have.
Can you state what you saw?
Very bad condition exists here. It doesn't seem like it's going to let down at the present time.
You read that? Over.
Yes, exactly. Describe again. Where are you, Joe, and what is happening?
Right now, Chief, I'm on the corner of Ward and Gordon Park. We've had tear gas. water hosing, guns have been drawn, knives have been flying, rocks, broken windows. As of yet, my wagon is very lucky, not a scratch on it yet. Over.
Are there many people involved in this, Joe?
Yes, Chief, there are. I'd say, well, at least 200 to 300 Negroes, and we've got about 200 officers. Over. And statesmen. Over.
Anything else that you see, Joe, that you'd like to tell us about? Over.
They're still picking them up right now. In fact, there's one going by me right now. Just hang on. Officer, can you hold it? Can you catch that? Did you catch that?
Yes, we did. Joe, thank you very much for reporting the field. Please call back as soon as you have anything more. Now back to the studio and Dick Burt.
A report from our mobile unit in the area of Ward Street. There have been throughout the afternoon a number of outbreaks of violence, most of them, however, involving fewer people than what Joe is reporting at this time. Last night, the scene was much different, of course. We do have film, and we'll go through that at this time, showing what the conditions were over at the Public Safety Building. An accurate count has not been made, but we understand there were approximately 390 arrests made since 8 o'clock last night. That information from Arthur Deutsch, the information officer for the city. Here you see the paddy wagon unloading people who have been arrested. Now, many of them are charged with violation of curfew. This is a lesser offense, is not a felony offense as I understand it, as compared to, say, disorderly conduct or looting or something of this sort. But for violation of curfew, which goes into effect at 8 o'clock in the evening. There's Jensen, incidentally, Officer Jensen, who we understand just was taken to the hospital. He is from exhaustion. These men were brought in hour after hour. Approximately 30 women were arrested also last evening, demonstrators in violation of curfew or on one charge or another. And you can see they're not all Negroes. There are whites that are arrested. Those who are involved in the fighting and squabbling apparently are being held without bond for at least 48 hours. Those who may be just out on the streets loitering are being held, released on bond. Here you see damaged police vehicles, and practically every car that came in last night had a broken window somewhere along either the side, the back, or the front. The cars showing dents and scratches, and in some cases they've been hit. There's Officer Jensen again. You can see the fatigue on that man's face, smile coming through, but this afternoon he was overcome by exhaustion and taken to the hospital. These pictures help to show the age of some of the people that are arrested. Now, you'll notice the ones that are taken under, that are arrested are not youngsters, they're not children, they're adults for the most part. There have been many comments about the age of the people taking part in this. We have another announcement we'll pass along while this film is going on. Parents of the distressed area who want their children moved to the suburbs for the night are asked to call. We have two numbers, Locust 2-7238 or Baker 5-6686 for more information where area churches are setting up a center for children's transportation and care. Now, this is apparently a project of Rochester area churches, and we'll repeat this information along with other announcements. Here, incidentally, you'll see a Red Cross. The Red Cross and the Salvation Army have been on hand to give refreshments to the men who've been working on the police details. These films taken inside the Public Safety Building where the paddy wagons and patrol cars brought in the people who were apprehended last night. Approximately 200 city police, about 300 state police, some sheriff's deputies and police from the neighboring towns have been in action. These films taken last night during the disturbances. Our mobile unit there at the scene.
We interrupt championship bowling to bring you the following special news program. Channel 13 News Special with WOKR News Director Ray Law.
Good evening. Some 60 persons have been arrested some 80 injured during the almost day-long racial rioting which began in Rochester about midnight following the arrest of a Negro man at a street dance. The man was arrested for being drunk and disorderly. This apparently sparked the rioting, but there are many rumors. Right now, the city is in a state of emergency, and we'll call on Channel 13 reporter Dick Burt to brief us on the current situation and what steps have been taken to meet it. Dick?
Well, Ray, as you know, we recently returned from the troubled area, which is basically the 7th Ward of the city of Rochester. On our map, it's the area bordered by St. Paul Street, basically over here, although Clinton Avenue is the real heart. Clinton Avenue, Clifford on the north, Goodman on the west, Main Street, although basically Central Avenue on the south. We very recently returned from that area. We can report at this time that the situation is tense, but definitely under control. There are sporadic outbursts. A bottle is dropped occasionally. Name-calling goes on, a little pushing and shoving, but the tremendous rioting of last night is under control. Now, that is our last report from the scene. Earlier this afternoon, we talked to a very tired and bedraggled city manager, and he gave us this information.
But this is basically a tool to facilitate the handling of the problem that we're faced with this evening.
Well, now, do you feel you have adequate manpower to handle any situation that may develop this evening? There was speculation, I understand, at one time about the National Guard. Was that ever considered, or is that being considered now?
Well, we have asked for the National Guard to be available to us if the situation gets out of hand, and as I understand it, they cannot be made available until the sheriff and the local people say they can no longer handle it, and the state police recommend to the governor they be brought in. We frankly would like to have it on a closer basis, rather have them available to call in on short notice rather than a 3 or 4 hour basis.
But they will be available if the local authorities are unable to maintain law and order. Now, I wonder if you could tell us, have you been in conference with any of the civil rights leaders of the community or any spokesmen for groups that may have been involved in last night's disturbances?
There have been a good many of the civil rights people that have come in and talked to us. I don't think that it would be accurate or fair to say that very many, if any of them, were involved actually in the rioting last night.
You have the impression then that actually this may not have been entirely a racial demonstration?
We've had no opportunity to ascertain exactly what it is. We've been just working hard trying to keep up with it.
Thank you very much. Porter W. Homer, City Manager of the City of Rochester.
Dick, Mr. Homer has given us the city's action and the police department action on last night's rioting, including, of course, an explanation of the curfew that has taken effect. Other steps have been taken. I understand the State Liquor Authority has made a pronouncement. Can you give us something on that?
Yes, there have been a lot of questions about the nature of the curfew, what it means, and I think perhaps we can clarify that somewhat, although we have a statement from Commissioner Corbett in that regard. When we were in the office, I noticed that he contacted the theaters, the amusement parks, the beaches. All of the public places have been notified that they are to be closed by 8 o'clock. Bus service will be terminated by that time. Anybody on the bus will be taken to their destination. But the city is to be put to bed at 8 o'clock this evening. Now, in the meantime, at 5 o'clock, the sale of all alcoholic beverages was terminated and will remain that way until 5 o'clock tomorrow. That not only covers the city, but all adjacent towns. All towns adjacent to the city will not be permitted to sell alcoholic beverages at hotels, bars, in stores, grocery stores, or anywhere else. All of these steps, of course, being taken, Ray, in order to assure the fullest possible cooperation in maintaining law and order this evening. So all church activities, the Harvest Queen program, any public gathering has been called off. Perhaps I should point out that if people are going to work or if they're employed at hospitals or other vital services, police will permit them to travel. However, they're asked to keep identification with them and to be prepared to be turned back if there should be any difficulty. but they will permit people to travel to work in certain areas. The general rule of thumb at the Public Safety Building this afternoon was just common sense to stay out of trouble.
Well, Dick, I understand that you later talked with the Public Safety Commissioner, Don Corbett. He had some words of encouragement about the situation being under control, although there was talk this afternoon, and we heard police reports, of course, about some possible rumblings in that same area that they would be looking for tonight. However, state police, I understand there are about 1,000 police all told down in that area, are watching the situation, but perhaps you could tell us something about what Mr. Corbett said.
Well, Mr. Corbett, I think, is attempting to, first of all, maintain law and order. He made a statement for us on film, and I think we could take a look at that next.
We have, as you know, been having trouble in the city of Rochester with rioting in the last 12 to 15 hours. We've asked the assistance of the state police, and the state police have responded beautifully, and they brought their troopers in, and with the forces that we have from the city of Rochester and our surrounding towns, which are also sending in their help, and with the state police, we feel we have the situation well in control. We are imposing a curfew, asking all citizens to stay off the streets of the city of Rochester after 8 o'clock this evening, and we earnestly beg the citizens to help us and to obey this and to stay off the streets. I have secured an order from the State Liquor Authority prohibiting the sale of all alcoholic beverages in the city of Rochester and the towns surrounding the city from 5 o'clock tonight until 5 o'clock tomorrow night, and this will be continued on a day-to-day basis if we find it to be necessary. Again, I would like to urge the citizens to please cooperate. We feel that everything is well under control, and we intend to enforce law and order in this city.
That was Public Safety Commissioner Donald Corbett with an official statement, of course, covering the entire police department, which is primarily responsible for law and order in this day-long rioting. Now, as of course most of you are aware, this started about midnight, and shortly thereafter, our chief photographer, Joe Pell, was on the scene. He has been on the scene almost, in fact, I would say continuously since that time, with the interruption for a hamburger or something of that nature. But he's taken a great deal of film, and we would like to show that to you now, starting from the darkness hours when the rioting began, and then later it reached a height. These scenes, Joe, generally are mostly scenes of mobs gathering, of wrecked cars. A good deal of glass was shattered. What were these people doing in this area?
These are the people that early this morning, they were coming out of Joseph Avenue going towards Central Avenue. And the mob scene that was underneath the bridge somewheres just kept throwing rocks and bottles and whatnot.
This was largely in the vicinity of the old New York Central Railroad station then?
Right. And there's a few there that were...
These were, some arrests were being made at this time of both Negro and white?
Yes, right, they were.
Mm-hmm.
There's a police car right there, and well, I can't recognize who that was.
We had word that one of the officers injured, we said earlier, 80 persons at least have been injured. It's a little bit hard to determine just how many were at this point. John D'Angelo, Patrolman John D'Angelo, is now in the hospital, has an eye injury apparently from a thrown bottle, and is not, he is in rather serious condition, of course, from this injury. Of course, this is the point. About when did the fire truck start arriving at the scene? I believe.
I think around 3 or 4 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. At one point, we had a report from a patrolman earlier today that although there was much activity going on in the pre-dawn hours, that actually the height of the rioting took place perhaps about 6 and 6:30 in the morning. Is that, would you...
That's when they were coming out with a little burst, just about every 10 or 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm. This film here, of course, is all of the film that was taken
You notice that knife that he removed from this young lady?
Now, what happened to her there?
She wasn't hit by the car. She just laid right down. And I don't know if she made an attempt to pull the knife or not.
The officer at least arrested it from her.
The officer saw it, and he took it away from her.
Mm-hmm. There's another.
There's another one that
injured. This is still.
No,
at
that's
night.
from rock throwing. That one. That little boy.
That was from a rock being thrown.
Let's see.
These scenes more or less speak for themselves as to people pushing in, police pushing back. Some
right
people,
there,
of
I
course,
think, Ray, if I may interject, right there, they were trying to hold this mob back. On the other side, they were throwing rocks.
Yes. Now,
and bottles and
that I believe is the nighttime film that we have at this time. Later on, of course, as daylight came, activity still kept up. And I know in this next sequence of film that we are about to show here, at this point, the fire trucks that were brought in earlier went into action.
Right. I think they picked up a couple there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there they're getting ready.
Where was the action as far as the opposing?
This, I would say, most right around Central Avenue and Joseph Avenue, going toward Clinton, up by the Little Chef restaurant. I think it'll show in these films.
I know a number of the, besides city police, there are a number of sheriff's deputies in these pictures. At this time, the state police...
they were just about arriving, right around this time.
Mm-hmm. Because the call came for the state police at 3 o'clock. I believe they arrived about 5 or 5:30 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, here they come now. I think this is the sheriff's department.
This is the sheriff's men here. I believe it was a little bit later when the state police actually arrived. Those are the...
This is where the mob scene was just moving toward Clinton Avenue.
This was at the Little Chateau restaurant right near the railroad station there.
Here's your state, I guess, yeah. You'll notice that they had canine dogs.
All right, those were interesting, if the kind of shots we don't like to see too often here in Rochester, of course. Now, as the morning broke, activity, instead of simmering down after the long, sultry nighttime hours, it continued, and let's see what happens here in this next film as the day wears on. This is a what would you say, about daybreak or so?
This boy right here that's being taken away, I imagine his windows were broken, and I guess he just couldn't hold back his feelings.
The state police are on the scene there at this point.
Here's a boy here that got hurt pretty bad.
How was he
his
hurt?
bottom lip was just about hanging.
Was this from a knifing?
I think that was a rock throw.
I see. I think we'll notice in these scenes coming up here that we have edited, Joe, that as the daylight came and the crowds started to actually grow at this particular time. There were apparently more on hand than there may have been earlier in the evening.
Yeah, they were breaking all over the place.
Yes. Now, you've been, after that point, you cruised up and down Joseph Avenue, and of course, I think it was in the daylight hours, too, that Chief William Lombard was down there with his own personal car, had it overturned, and this scene will be shown in our next cut here on the film.
That was...
This was on Joseph Avenue,
yeah,
where
was
this
right
happened?
on Joseph Avenue there. And there's...
The damage has exceeded at least over $500,000 at this point.
It's frightening. It really is frightening.
Well, where was it? Largely
say,
from around Herman Street to
right
largely?
from Herman all the way up to, pretty close to Clifford, I'd say. And
there was...
during this time, there was still quite a bit of looting going on.
You saw... who was doing the looting?
Kids.
I mean, mostly youngsters?
No, I think it was just anyone and everyone.
Any hooligan who might happen to be in the area at the time?
In this...
See, there were some broken TV sets there, and
this is where they were proving freedom now, and what they did, they hid the core and just said freedom now.
I see. Well, the core sign. Is this in a core office window?
There's a young lady that had an accident there.
Yes.
There's the Rundequoit police pulling in.
Yes, there were. Did you notice quite a few other suburban police there also?
There were quite a few, Ray. This is where they're demonstrating out in the street.
Some, apparently the crowd there is taunting the police more or less?
They were edging them on, and they came up with their freedom signs.
Were they beginning to simmer down at this point?
Nope. Not at this point.
Not at this point.
At this point, I think they were right about at their peak. They were getting little gatherings in buildings.
What was most of the debris from garbage or rubbish and things like that tossed out?
Yeah. It all depends what type of a store.
Merchandise.
This one here, I think, was on the corner of Buchan Park. It was. I think everybody was just frightened to death. They knew they just had to keep going, or.
They were sort of caught up in a mob hysteria and more or less without knowing what they were doing or why they were doing it.
He was quite exhausted.
Yes.
He had just gotten in his car and someone threw a rock, and as you can see, he was trying to protect his eyes, and I guess he injured his leg.
Yes, Joe. Now, I know that during the night you were with Lou Osier, who was one of Rochester's most outstanding freelance photographers, during a good part of the evening, and you suffered a little tear gas yourself, didn't you? And I believe Lou suffered quite a bit, and I think we'll see some of that in the next strip that is now being rolled.
This is where one of the men saw it come by gas, and they were helping him out. And at this time, Lou was overcome. This is Lou Osier.
Who are the people helping him here?
These people, I think, lived up on Buchan Park somewheres. And I thought it was very nice when they went in the house, got ice cubes and cold towels, and I was just about able to see what I was doing. If you'll see right here, you'll see me rocking, and then it hit me.
Did you find the people who lived in that area who weren't actually part of the rioters?
There were quite a few of them.
And they were quite friendly toward you?
Very friendly. I think if it weren't for these people here, I don't think I'd be here right now.
Did any of them think that there were a large number of these who came from out of that area, or were they mostly in the area, mostly younger people in the area? You wouldn't notice that from what the police told you at that time. I think later on, as the morning wore on, the police began, and the Department of Public Works and other organizations came in to clean up, and this is what the film now shows, some of the beginning of the cleanup activity of the debris in the street.
And they've done a fairly good job. They were just starting to clean up through this area here. And there was nothing but broken glass throughout the area. Clothing.
The streets are wet in those spots we saw there, largely because of the hoses that had been used earlier, I would imagine. State policeman here in the scene. Incidentally, in the clip that is coming up right after this one, I believe those are the shots where the state police were organized, or were beginning to be organized. On that, what time was it that the state police were in formation and were given their orders? I think we can roll that film now, perhaps could recall it. I wouldn't wonder that you wouldn't know what time of day it was at this time.
I really don't. But I would take a rough guess around, I'd say about 10 or so.
10 or 11 o'clock.
10 or 11 o'clock. This is
were there a number of observers on hand at this time?
They were still observing, and this is where they were starting to tell them to get back into their homes.
This is when the crowds were being dispersed. About 10. In fact, the rioting continued practically unabated, you would say, up until about 10 or 11 this morning.
I'd say close to noon.
Close to noontime. We had, therefore, we had a good 12 hours of steady activity on the streets, with the stores being looted, with people being shoved around, with debris being scattered. And you were there during that entire period.
And I think everybody cooperated fairly well at this time.
I think that showed the beginning of the cleanup of the streets and debris, and the clip that we talked about, or I talked about just a moment ago, about the state police moving in and lining up in formation. I think that is coming up next here. There are quite a few clips, and there it is now.
They're just standing there, and
now they're in marching. About how many men would you estimate were in that force there?
In this particular force, Ray, I would say around possibly 70.
Mm-hmm. And where was this?
This area here, it's right on Clinton Avenue.
Oh, right around the corner from the railroad
Buchan
station?
Park. This is
oh,
the area
Buchan
right
Park
here.
and
then
Clinton
they
Avenue,
dispersed
yes.
and went wherever they had to go, and then they were standing guard. And I think, or is it the next corner? There was still quite a bit of looting going on, and they. You know, keep shooting so much.
I know. You can see the broken glass, the obviously robbed store windows and store fronts. Now, at this point, they were.
This is where they were starting to tell everyone to go back home. Now, in this area right here is where they pick up someone way up in the right-hand corner, and he had just left a store, and I think he passed something on to someone else.
He was one of the looters.
Mm-hmm.
What about, I see Raven's Clothing Center there, and the film, was that looted also?
I don't think there was too much looting at Ravens. I think they just broke all the windows there. But drugstores and grocery stores, you found watermelons all over, and no sheets of bed clothing where someone must have gotten a bloody nose, and it was quite
I think that we have one more strip of film here, if I'm not mistaken, that would show some of that cleanup operation, Joe. There it is, this point where the Department of Public Works has moved in and is throwing the glass and cut up objects.
They've done a very good job. A very good job.
And
and as you can notice, the youngsters are still out, looking around.
Yes.
And you can see the windows are bare. The clothing's been taken off the mannequins.
Joe, I think the film spoke very graphically for themselves. Thank you so much. I hope that you will, and everybody else in the city will be able to get a good rest tonight. Well, we've just heard word that one of our remote wagons is out in the area or around the area and has a report to make at this time. I believe it may be Jerry Carr. I'm not certain. I'll play this by ear at this time. Jerry, would you please come in?
Jerry Carr, this is the news desk. Come in wherever you are.
Driving further down Joseph Avenue, actually heading north, approaching Sellinger Street to the left. Still more police vehicles. Wherever you look, you find the men in gray and also the Rochester blue, a familiar sight. And as we said earlier, if one had been perhaps away from the city of Rochester, returning tonight, Joseph Avenue would look almost normal, except, as we say, for the plywood jungle that surrounds us. That's about it from the scene here. We'll continue on patrol, and in the meantime, we return to Ray Laws at the WOKR Newsroom.
Thank you very much, Jerry Carr, for that report. It is encouraging to note that although the situation apparently is somewhat tense, Dick, that apparently things are under control at this moment. We hope and pray, of course, that this will continue throughout this evening. Now, Dick, I know that you, as well as I, have talked with a number of people about what caused this situation, what were not only the immediate factors that caused it, but some of the underlying factors. We do have a program that we aired earlier here that has been put on videotape with some of the Negro leaders of the community with some of their analysis on it. However, I think before we go into that, we should talk a bit about some of the ideas that we have heard on the situation. Now, as far as the immediate sparking of the riot was concerned, it has been generally agreed that a man was arrested apparently for drunkenness and disorderliness at a street dance. There's also been talk, however, of what really touched it off. Some leaders have, Negro leaders have said, because police dogs were introduced, and there was the rumor, as we mentioned earlier, that a dog did get loose, did bite one of the Negro children. Now, have you heard during your wanderings around today, Well, you hear a great deal of speculation, a great deal of opinions, some of it based perhaps on just simple conjecture, Ray. I think that hardly a Friday night goes by but what there's an arrest for D&D, as we say. Last Friday night, I had the duty, and I never heard the police radio as busy as it was. Throughout the entire course of the evening, you could almost sense something building up.
That was just last night.
That was, yes, last night. Now, why it happened in Rochester is a big question. I heard one interesting theory on the subject. Why did it get out of hand in Rochester? Why not Syracuse, Buffalo, any of a dozen or 2 dozen northern cities? And one person took the view that because Rochester is a well-to-do city and the contrasts are so pronounced, where you have an underprivileged section of the community who can look just a few blocks on either direction and see a lot of people with a lot of material things, a lot of good things, and enjoying life. They seem to think that because Rochester had so much and the contrast was so pronounced, this might be an explanation of why it happened here. I don't think anybody has the answer of why it happened in Rochester. New York City seems like a distant country. We think it can happen down there, but why Rochester? It's keeping people guessing.
I think it shocked a lot of us here, including those of us who have lived here all of our lives, as you and I have. I would like to say at this point that we did receive word just before airtime here that Mayor Frank Lamb, whom we are yet to hear from on the program, had agreed to meet with Negro leaders at the Baden Street settlement this evening apparently on talking over some of the ways of preventing this in the future, and that one of the Negro leaders who have been arrested, a gentleman by the name of Nathaniel Wise, had been released from jail to act as sort of a gentleman to gather up the other leaders so that they could meet with the mayor on this situation. This was a report we had just before he came on. I suppose they'll be talking about just that kind of thing that you were talking about.
We talked to a number of Negro leaders, too, down at the Public Safety Building. And a strange thing, because at that time the mayor had just made an appeal for law and order, and I asked some of the leaders of the Negro community if they had any statement, and their reaction was, we'd rather sort of stand aside. At this time, we don't feel we can do any good. We can't stop this sort of thing, and it's going to be wasted effort. These people are just going to have to settle down, and we don't want to alienate them. We want to keep some sort of communication going between the people that are demonstrating or rioting so that eventually we can get together. I think that what they're trying to do is to have the city understand the basic problems here. There are no specific demands. I mean by that, they don't want to be able to go to Ontario Beach Park, or they don't want to be able to play in the playground or something of this sort. There isn't a list of demands to be met. It's, I think, an attempt to try to understand the problem. That's why the leaders are meeting with city officials.
I think some of these, some of the basic demands they may have may be pointed up, however, in the program we saw earlier here on Channel 13 as a special with our Negro leaders, and right now I think we'd like to see that particular portion to get their ideas.
Here with the story is WOKR News Director Ray Law.
Good evening. We have invited Negro leaders of the Rochester community to speak to our Channel 13 audience this evening on today's racial troubles in Rochester. First, may I introduce the people in our studio tonight. At my left, Miss Hannah Storrs, who is president of the Congress for Racial Equality, or the Congress of Racial Equality. Next to me, Mrs. Constance Mitchell, who is supervisor of the 3rd Ward. And at my right, Mr. Robert Morrison, who is president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Rochester Chapter. We'll begin first with you, Mrs. Mitchell, and I'd like to ask you, first of all, were you in the trouble area last night?
Yes, I was. Mr. Maxwell Walters, the supervisor from the 7th Ward, and myself, we were in the area until 6 this morning.
How were you alerted to it?
I was called at 11:45 last night of the trouble that was taking place in the area.
Who called you on it?
A friend.
I see. And you went over there to see what you could do.
No, I didn't go at that particular time. My husband went, and about an hour later, I received 2 anonymous phone calls that informed me that I, along with other niggers, needed to get out of town, and that if I didn't, my house was going to be blown up. And so we had a policeman come by the house, and he stayed at the house until this morning, but I went to my mother-in-law's and took my daughter and then went to the trouble area.
Now, there have been different versions on how the immediate trouble started. I know there must be underlying causes there, but first of all, would you tell us what you believe to be the immediate cause, the spark of the riot last night?
Well, this I cannot tell you because I do not know. I can only go by rumor. But I think that one of the causes of the rioting that started last night is the folly of ignoring the needs of the Negro compressed into the ghetto has been demonstrated by the spontaneous riot which appeared last night. And I think that continuing discrimination and degrading of the Negro has finally exploded in spite of the constant warnings that were given that this would happen in our Rochester community.
Well, earlier it had been reported that a man was arrested at a street dance and that this touched off the whole thing. Wasn't there anything further than that at the street dance?
Well, it has been said, and this again is rumor, that it was a police dog that bit a woman on the cheek that actually sparked it off. This, I really shouldn't even be repeating the rumors, but this seems to be the most prevalent rumor that I've heard in the area, that this sparked off the spontaneous rioting.
A number of Negro leaders told me this afternoon that I talked with in your area particularly, that they believed there would have been no trouble if merely the man had been arrested. A lot of people seem to think that bringing in the police dogs touched it off more than anything else. Does this seem to be a general sentiment? Would you say this is so?
This might be so, Mr. Laws, but I feel that the frustrations that have built up in the Negro community over a period of years came actually to a boiling point last night. And I think that this is where the trouble has started. I think that not only this might not have sparked it, I think perhaps any incident might have sparked it off.
Well, you speak of the troubles that have beset the Negro people for years in this community. Can you name me some of the troubles that have been caused?
Housing, very bad housing, lack of employment. All of these face the Negro in the community. And even though Rochester is a city with many highly skilled positions, if you are an unskilled individual and the door is not open to you, the frustrations come on, Mr. Laws, and this we find in the Negro community where there are lack of jobs. And when there's lack of jobs, there's lack of money. When there's lack of money, there's lack of food.
Well, there have been repeated charges of police brutality in the Rochester area. Do you believe that any such was involved last night or this morning?
This I did not see, and I'm not going to sit here and go by rumor, because many rumors are flying through the city at this point.
Well, to turn to a more positive aspect of the situation, what do you feel that you can do right at this time?
Well, I feel that there isn't too much I can do at this particular time to stem the tide of passion that is running at this time. And since even I have not been able to communicate with city officials and get across to them the seriousness of this whole explosive situation, all I can do is hope and pray for the best for tonight.
You mean you haven't been able to communicate today or in the past?
I mean today.
All right. do you feel that community leaders then could have done something in past months or past years to stem any such rioting as we had in Rochester today?
I think that many of the programs that have been worked in the Negro community in the past years, in the past months, certainly could have helped. We've all seen this coming on. We've all prophesied and said that it would come to Rochester, New York. And I think perhaps if we would have all worked a little bit harder, we might have avoided it. But then again, we do not know.
I see. By all, do you mean Negro leaders as well?
Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mrs. Mitchell, was there any personal experience that you had during the rioting during the night that you might care to tell us?
Well, I would like to say this, that I know what it is to have a hose on you now.
Mm-hmm.
And this came about 5:15 this morning. And my only hope and my prayer at this particular point is that I will not see these same hoses again tonight, and that there will be peace and tranquility in Rochester tonight.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mitchell. And now, if we may, we will talk to Mr. Morrison, who is president of the NAACP, the Rochester chapter. And Mr. Morrison, I believe you have a statement for the community?
Yes, I do. The Rochester branch of the NAACP urges all citizens to observe the curfew which has been established by the city administration in the current emergency. We recognize the problems that exist in the Negro community. However, riots, such as the one last night, will only make it more difficult to work towards solution of these problems. The NAACP does not condone the rioting, the destruction of property, or the looting. Such actions seriously hinder the civil rights cause. The NAACP is gravely concerned about the problems concerning the total Negro community, and we want to assure you that our organization will do everything in its power to see that these problems are remedied. Representatives from our national office are in Rochester, working with the local branch and city officials to ensure that the problems will be alleviated. Only when order is restored will we be able to work toward resolving these crucial problems. We implore you to obey the curfew and remain in your homes, thereby assisting us in working toward improving conditions in our community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrison. And now we will hear from the president of the Rochester Chapter Congress of Racial Equality, Miss Hannah Storrs. Miss Storrs, how was CORE involved in the race riots today? How were you personally involved also?
Again, I think that one of the things we must think about in our community is that none of us sitting here tonight really know what happened. We were informed, CORE as an organization, last night about the same time as Mrs. Mitchell. At that time, because of lack of transportation, our vice president went out into the area. And this is how we became involved, and this is how we got all of our reports on what was going on. But I'd like to say a few things about the things in the Rochester community that precipitated this kind of action. CORE does not condone any kind of violence. We again would like to see law and order. But we must look at and examine our community. I feel that I can say a great deal about our community because I've lived here all my life. And I've lived in the so-called Negro ghetto, the 3rd Ward most of my life, and for the past year in the 11th Ward. And I think that we must look at the things that the people who live in these communities face. CORE feels that if Negroes had been allowed to move freely in the community, move where they wanted to, and get the kinds of jobs they were qualified for, we would not have had the riot last night. We feel that the crowding of people in two sections of our city is very serious. I know how the young people in these communities feel. I've talked to them, and I think it's time that our city realized that it can no longer create Negro leaders, that it can no longer sit by idly and listen to people who say everything is all right, that it must start going in, making sure that we have equal opportunity in housing, in education, and in employment. And that it must be a community effort, must go down and talk to all of the people and work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Storrs. From Channel 13 News, a report from Negro leaders of the Rochester community on today's rioting in Rochester. And those, of course, were the opinions and views of Negro leaders in the Rochester area on today's rioting. Now, we did have a number of calls during the day on presenting the other side of the picture, so-called. Well, when police and the city administration are as beleaguered as the city administration of Rochester is at the present time, it is rather difficult for these people in a position of authority who are responsible for keeping law and order to analyze the situation, and this, of course, they have not done. However, similar to the appeal of Mr. Morrison, who is president of the Rochester chapter of NAACP, the mayor of the city of Rochester, Frank Lamb, also appealed for calm and for reasonableness in this situation.
My fellow citizens, our city has undergone a period of strife that is most serious and filled with dangerous implications for all of us. I urge all of you to abide by the curfew order of the city manager, to use sound judgment and good common sense. All of us, rich, poor, of one faith or another, of one color or another, have more to lose than to gain if this senseless abandonment to lawlessness continues. I appeal to citizens of all persuasions to put the good of the community we all love ahead of personal or group animosities. Your city administration believes that most Rochesterians will do what is right. I am sure you will be on the right side when you are counted.
Thank you, Mayor Lamb. And now, again, Dick Burt with me here at our Channel 13 news desk. And the time has come, I guess, since the hour is growing rather late, at least the hour since last midnight, and these events have taken place all this day, to more or less assess the situation, to review some of the steps that have been taken so that, as far as possible at least, confusion may be alleviated in the situation. Now, Dick, I wonder if you would reiterate the steps, particularly as regarding the curfew, which has resulted perhaps in more confusion and considerable irritation, I might add.
Well, anyone that witnessed the activities last night can understand the first regulation, which is to halt the sale of all alcoholic beverages in Rochester and in all the adjacent towns. That's Arundecoit, Greece, Webster, Penfield, Perrington, Brighton, Henrietta, Chiline, Gates. Alcoholic beverages cannot be sold in those areas until 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Now, this regulation may be renewed on a day-to-day basis if the situation warrants. As far as the curfew is concerned, Ray, it goes into effect in just about a half hour from now, 35 minutes to be exact. At 8 o'clock, the curfew will be in effect, and all of Rochester will be covered by the curfew, not just the area that is immediately involved in the disturbance.
Dick, the question has come up regarding the curfew, and I know you were down there conferring with Mr. Corbett this afternoon. Does this mean a curfew for people who are not only pedestrians but also driving their automobiles?
Yes, that's right, Ray. As far as you're to be in your home from 8 o'clock on. This, of course, would be waived for people who are going to work in some cases. We've been told that the police will permit people who are employed or have a service to perform, they will be permitted to go to their job if they're properly identified and so forth, the hospital employees and the like. But there will be no Entertainment this evening, the theaters will be closed, the beaches will be closed, the bars, the restaurants, any place of public accommodation will be closed this evening, and so that means people might just as well stay home.
Have you been able to learn places of public accommodation being closed? I know this is an order from both Sheriff Skinner and the city manager as far as liquor establishments are concerned, but what about the drive-in theaters and other establishments outside the city limits? Have you been able to learn anything about that?
The curfew is in effect in the city of Rochester. It does not go beyond that limit at this time.
But such establishments that do not sell alcoholic beverages in the county outside perhaps may be open.
That's right.
I was wondering now, we've seen, of course, in our pictures previously, the number of state police on hand here. Did you get any estimate of the number of state police who are here and how long they're going to stay?
Well, the report we had from the state police, and they're about 200 strong, they came in from the western New York area, would be that they would be here overnight. So it will be done, all decisions, I'm sure, on a day-to-day basis until there's some evidence that the situation returns to normal. I think the key to it is that they don't want a second night such as they've had in some other cities in the country.
So this will be on a day-to-day basis, and if necessary, and we hope not also, as Porter W. Homer said earlier, perhaps elements of the National Guard could be called in. But that's just about it at this time, Dick. We will be back from time to time as the situation dictates for any further reports on the situation. Dick, this has been Dick Burt and Ray Laws speaking for Channel 13 News. Good evening.
This has been a Channel 13 News special. Stay tuned to Channel 13 for further developments as they occur. You are invited to a fiesta, the fabulous Fiesta Americana at the exciting Americana.
This evening has been in the 3rd Ward area as opposed to the 7th Ward last night. There have been problems in the 7th Ward, but it seems to be more the 3rd Ward tonight.
I might add that this is not the heart of the old 3rd Ward. It more or less borders on the 19th Ward, and perhaps the large part of the area is in the old 19th Ward before the redistricting of the city was made a couple of years ago. Actually, it is either in the old 19th or bordering closely on it right now, mostly bounded in the areas of Jefferson Avenue, Katy Street, Reynolds Street, right around in there, running through the intersections of Jefferson Street for some 10 blocks from West Main Street. And there...
Ray, you were down there this evening. Ray Laws and our chief photographer, Joe Powell, and Jerry Carr, and 2 different mobile units covering the area of the 3rd Ward went down at considerable risk as further events turned out. Ray, can you tell us about what time did you get there and what was the first reception that you received?
I don't know the exact time. It was just getting dusk. It was probably around 8 o'clock or a little after, I believe, when we got into that area. Jerry Carr and I had just finished cruising the area of the rioting that began at midnight, as you know. Today, it seems like much longer than that, but that's when it started. There, it was very quiet, with the state police largely manning all the intersections. However, large numbers of people were gathered, despite the curfew that had been ordered, even in that area, mostly in doorways, and were not congregating too much on street corners. However, then the call came, Mayday, from police headquarters. We rushed over to the Jefferson-Katy area, and immediately, I might say, rushed into trouble as soon as we stopped the car. We did get out. We were able to take some few pictures there. However, before we could really establish the pictures, were driven back into the automobiles with a barrage of bottles, bricks. Many of the bottles, of course, were beer bottles, but others were soft drink bottles that had been stripped from machines in stores nearby, and the stores had been looted by breaking windows, as was the pattern earlier today. At this point, the first gunshot was fired when Patrolman Joe Verso, standing at the intersection of Jefferson and Katy, was under a barrage of bottles. He suddenly pulled out his gun and fired down the street, away from Jefferson Avenue, down Katy Street. Apparently no one was hit at this point, but the barrage stopped for a moment. We were pressed back into the automobile, however, and we were about 6 blocks away from West Main Street at that time, and as we slowed down, bricks began to hit the side of the automobile. So Jerry Carr stepped on the gas literally about 65 miles an hour, just barely making the turn into Main Street, and we were hit several times. We passed the other news wagon at that point, slowed down momentarily, and were hit heavily again, and then continued. That was about the story there.
Well, I think perhaps that should explain why we've been unable to keep our mobile units in the area in consideration of their own welfare, and consequently we've been unable to get complete reports. Now, we do have some unconfirmed reports. However, there seems to be sufficient backing in them, Ray, to pass them along. We do have word of one fatality at this time, an elderly white man who reportedly was struck over the head by a man who was looting a store in the Clarissa Street area. The man suffered the blow and went into the street where he was struck by a passing car. And the report was that he was killed. There's been no identification of this man. There was another report, Ray, of a homicide. However, that one apparently was not involved with the racial difficulties.
I guess we will have to say at this point that the fatalities reported have not been definitely linked with the racial rioting, except perhaps the one where the man was struck by the car, and of course that'll have to be determined how death actually occurred, even though it was certainly an indirect result of the rioting at this particular point. I might add, too, that the mayor has called a conference with leaders. Do you know something of that?
It's my understanding that Mayor Lamb, at this very moment, is conducting a conference with Negro leaders of the community in an attempt to see what advice and suggestions they may have as far as alleviating the situation. The leaders that we have spoken to, Ray, are the first to admit that they are in no position to stop this situation. Yes. That it is beyond the control of any individual or group of individuals to say that this thing is going to suddenly end. However, the mayor is in consultation with them. I would imagine that a statement will be forthcoming from them following their conference, which is underway right now at the City Safety Building. And we're, as a matter of fact, have a unit over there making a sound on film report.
It seems safe to say at the moment, Dick, that only the actual law enforcement officials, the police, can stop the rioting. Probably what can best come out of the mayor's conference is some sort of a pattern to prevent something like this in the future. What that would be and what kind of announcements will be made along that line, of course, we'll have to wait and see. Perhaps even in this program we may be able to get a report in on it, although it is going on right at this moment. It is unlikely, however, that anything can be done except main force at this time to stop what is going on. As you recall, we had the supervisor of the 3rd Ward, Mrs. Constance Mitchell, who was incidentally the only Negro woman supervisor elected in the United States. And, of course, the trouble did begin in her ward there tonight, but this afternoon she was asked what she could do, and although she had been there at the rioting scene on the other side of the city this morning, admitted that at this point there was nothing. Her influence carried little weight as far as the rioters were concerned.
To review the law enforcement organizations that have been committed to the struggle at the particular moment, of course, the Rochester City Police Department, the Sheriff's Office, the adjacent towns who have also made troops or manpower available. They are also forming a perimeter around the city. There have been periodic reports of cars coming in from out of the city, which are intercepted as they approach the city area and turned back. People, obviously curiosity seekers and others who are standing by. We do have a film that we'd like to run at this time, and we'll be back in just a moment.
These are the films taken of the rioting that started everything today, of course. Dick, these were the scenes largely around the Joseph Avenue area where so many stores were looted, where damage is now reported at well over $500,000, although I imagine it will be some time before insurance estimates are able to really pinpoint the exact amount of damage. Of course, new damage tonight on the west side is going to make that figure mount.
Well, we talked to one merchant this afternoon. He was walking down Joseph Avenue with a handful of fur coats. He was a furrier. He said, "I'm wiped out. I've lost $15,000 worth of fur coats." This is just one store. Now, certainly a number of stores have lost merchandise. But to continue on with our film, this is the scene early this morning as the sun came up and, of course, disturbances continued. The police officials at the scene, this is the police chief Lombard's car, which was overturned. Ray, I think you recall that Chief Lombard was at the scene of the original disturbance. He attempted to restore order, and this is where things got out of hand. The car was completely demolished, as you can see here.
Incidentally, he was called to the scene from a drive-in theater where he was attending a movie at the time, I understand, but he also was hurt shortly after he arrived at the scene at the time that his personal car was overturned. This is, of course, a wrecked television set. Yes. As far as police, during this film here, we will see the reinforcements of state police coming in, and many more have come in since that time. As a matter of fact, it was just a short time ago this evening that it was announced that all the state police in the city of New York have been placed on alert here for the Rochester area. And there's also a more recent report that Albany is standing by ready to call in the National Guard if the situation gets more out of hand than it is. Perhaps this won't be necessary.
I think because we got so many people asking about that situation, the National Guard, of course, is standing by at various posts around western New York, and city officials are in liaison with them. Now, the arrangement is simply this, that the city cannot call in the National Guard until they say they are no longer able to control order. I think that this perhaps gives an idea to the people that at this time, the law officers on the job consider that they do have things under control. If it should reach the point where they lose control, then they are free to call in the National Guard.
And than it is, perhaps this won't be necessary.
I think because we got so many people asking about that situation, the National Guard, of course, is standing by at various posts around western New York, and city officials are in liaison with them. Now, the arrangement is simply this, that the city cannot call in the National Guard until they say they are no longer able to control order. I think that this perhaps gives an idea to the people that at this time, the law officers on the job consider that they do have things under control. If it should reach the point where they lose control, then they are free to call in the National Guard. The National Guard cannot be brought in for police duty on a preventive basis. That is to say, they can't be brought in until their presence is absolutely necessary.
Yes, when the state police were brought over on into the 3rd Ward this evening, they came in by chartered bus and right into the middle of the area where all the rock tossing and brick throwing was going on. And they were immediately cheered or jeered, as you might put it, by the hordes of young people there. Now, there's, of course, a great deal of discussion as to whether these were actually racial riots. I think it's safe to say that they are actual racial riots, although it is the younger element, the hooligans, the irresponsibles, largely who have kept it up. There seems to be little doubt that they are using the racial question as an excuse.
Well, without passing, this man incidentally was overcome by tear gas, and his friends are attempting to. And here's another case.
This is Lou Ozier, a photographer, a freelance photographer.
Who, at the scene was overcome by tear gas. Now, we have had reports of tear gas in use this evening, too, Ray. Apparently, periodically, the police feel it advisable to use that, and it doesn't do any long-range damage, but it makes you get out in a hurry. It's pretty hard on the eyes. Obviously, he's getting some sympathetic treatment from some of the folks in the 7th Ward area who, another person obviously injured. Watermelons strewn throughout the area. Apparently, the fruit stands were pretty heavily hit as all kinds of fruit were picked up and thrown around in the streets. Now, these were films taken this morning. As far as the violence this evening, I think we should point out that we are not showing films of tonight's activities. These were films taken through the day today.
As a matter of fact, Dick, except for the geographical location, the scenes here on the west side this evening pretty much duplicated what we are seeing here right now. Of course, the mop-up operations will probably be coming tomorrow. We're seeing the cleaning up operations by the Department of Public Works at the present time. And incidentally, they did a very good job on it, as I saw just before dark tonight over in the sector we're now looking at. The streets were absolutely clear of any debris, garbage, glass, or anything of that kind. However, it looked like a plyboard jungle, more or less, because of the fact that practically every other store was boarded up where the windows had been smashed. But at least the area had been cleaned up. People were congregating in the doorways, but other than that, it didn't look so badly tonight.
In contrasting what's happened in Rochester with what's happened in New York, to me there seem to be some different situations here. In New York, the problems in Harlem were triggered off when a 15-year-old boy was shot by a police officer. This led to charges of police brutality, and of course the violence stemmed from that particular point. Now in Rochester, a man was arrested at a dance. He was taken under apprehension by the police for being drunk and disorderly, was the charge placed on him, and the disturbance spread from that point, a particular incident that triggered it off. However, it's our understanding that there have been no demands by any organized group for this, that, or the other thing. The spokesman for the NAACP, for CORE, for all of the civil rights groups know what the basic problems are, but there are no specific demands that such and such has to be done or should be done. Here we see, of course, the state police who were brought in about 7:30 or 8 o'clock this morning. We talked to them. They originally had been asked for at 3 o'clock in the morning when it was very violent. They were finally committed at 5:08 this morning. They formed up and moved into the area about 7:30, 200 strong. And of course, were instrumental in restoring order in the 7th Ward area this